polar regions. The forbidden area.
What do you know of conspiracy? It's the charming thing about them, isn't it? When a machination is real, no one knows about it.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live stream for the Restitutor Orbis channel. I'm your host, Lucius Aurelian, and I would like to extend a heartfelt welcome to all Prime Explorers, frequent viewers, and all others joining us on the channel. We are going to explore the unknown lands, and I've already seen some very interesting comments on the unknown lands. Namely, are we talking about the shape of the land or the realm, or are we actually just talking about some literal unknown lands? Well, we're going to discuss some unknown lands. And the reason I want to focus on unknown lands, and hey, Robert, good to see you, is the fact that I believe that the unknown lands do hold many answers for a lot of the things that we're looking for and we're exploring. Now, this first image that you see here, this is an actual official satellite image, apparently on a cloudless day, from our friends at NASA. And this shows us our first particular area that we're going to be exploring, and that is the North Polar region. And you might have figured out that from the little sound clip that I took from the film Dune, yes, polar regions tend to be forbidden. And a question I have for all of you is, why do these areas seem to be forbidden? Is it because there's some sort of mandate that we can't go there? Is it because it's physically difficult to go there? Are there other reasons? And what are your thoughts on that one? Captain Krampus. Yes, Greenland. Very interesting area. Hey, Sissy May. Hey, Robert. Good to see everybody. What are your thoughts? Oh, Sean P. here. Hyperborea in the center of flat plain. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. There's many different ways to look at it. Hey, Ishko, thanks for joining us. Don't worry, we're going to get to it. I wouldn't put it out there on the thumbnail if I wasn't going to use it now, would I? That would be very unbecoming of me as an alternative explorer. Military High Ground from Punchy McTaint. Love the name, by the way. Yes. Not really sure. It could be. Who can go there? Oh, that's a great point. Who can go there? Well, not the guys from Top Gear. We are actually going to talk about that. You might recall the original presenters of Top Gear, or at least the primary three that were remembered. They tried going there on an episode, the Arctic Exploration Special. Tabor, interesting clip of a ship going too close to Antarctica. Military involved with a warship. Oh yes, and there's always legitimate reasons for that. They were looking out for their safety, so on and so forth. Sean P. Airships went there. Quite correct, and that is in fact what the mainstream even informs us, and official history tells us that airships went there. We'll get to that as well. Now, oddly enough, when you look at these kinds of images, and here we actually have a weather image of the North Polar region. And I did feature this in a previous exploration. It was a long time ago, but I thought it was a nice image to show again. And oddly enough, you have this very, very unique and very geometrically precise circle almost. Although I guess it's a little blurred on the edges, but why is there a circle in the middle of that? What could that possibly represent? Is it merely a limitation of this particular weather map that we're using? And what's with all these satellites that are in geosynchronous orbit? And by the way, and of course, you know, if you accept the mainstream account, and it's okay if you do, that there were astronauts who went to the moon. They didn't get the chance to look at this particular region because they were focused looking outward at the moon. They never really looked at it. How long have we actually been exploring the North Polar region? According to official history, of course. Colonel Bird. Yeah, you're not far off. Good old Richard E. Byrd. Tabor, satellite, balloons. Yeah, exactly. Whatever you got going there. Oh, RB, Lord of the Ring. You're actually right, RB. And when we look at one of the maps, they actually refer to it as rings when we get to the Urbano Monte map. Yes, we'll be looking at that one, in addition to the aforementioned Mercator map, because those are just very interesting. Oh, Anne-Marie, the circle looks photoshopped. Yes, I would tend to agree with that, and very badly photoshopped. But, we don't know for sure. It just looks that way. Black Hole Sun. Good song, too. And oddly enough, featured in Westworld before that show went right off the cliff, which was after the first season. Should watch the original film, too. It's a good one. Anyways, so these are our official images of the North Polar region. And you would think, okay, if you're just any standard person, you've had your regular education, like I did, we'll just take me as an example, and I see this image and I think, there's really nothing interesting up here. It just looks like a barren area, just water. What could possibly be up there that's worthwhile? It's very cold. Why would I want to go up there? I see this image. Interesting weather patterns, but there's really nothing up there. Why would I care? Well, then you also look at some of the other depictions that we have of the North Pole, and again, it continues to reinforce that notion. It's just a frozen ocean. Yes, this is the actual North Pole, the geo-North Pole, but remember we have different North Poles. We have the North Magnetic Pole, and you might recall in other explorations we talked about how that thing seems to vary a lot. And oddly enough, the North Magnetic Pole is actually outside of 90 degrees latitude. I wonder why that is. 90 degrees north latitude, once you're really at the very top or the very center, depending on your perspective. Because remember, we're concerning ourselves with all perspectives. We're just trying to figure out, is there any actual land up there? And that's another question. We are repeatedly told there is no land up there. It's just a frozen ocean. But was there a point in time, does anybody remember when you had perhaps the memory, or maybe I should ask, the impression that there was actually land up there? What are your thoughts about that? Yeah, barren wasteland. You're exactly right. Something in under ice? Yes. Yeah, pretty much. Nothing to see here. It's just a boring place. It's frozen. There's nothing there. But that's what we're told to think, right? Kathy, but there are maps showing maps of Greenland. You were quite correct, Kathy, and we're going to be looking at some of those maps. Why do we have maps that actually show that? Hey, I am Kairos. Hyperborea? Yes, and it's funny because on the Conan exploration, someone was castigating me because of the fact that I said Conan's old world, Hyperborea. Apparently they didn't make the connection, but that's okay. No problem there. A lot of people actually remember land. Now, you could attribute it to the Mandela effect, or you can actually go back to this day and watch these old films, these old cartoons. Here, I got one for you. Maybe you've seen it. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Yes. Everybody remembers land up there. The North Pole. Santa Claus. I mean, Santa Claus wouldn't just be up there on an ice sheet, would he? I don't know. Maybe he would. Hey, Robert. My grade school globe. You're absolutely right. And there's actually a film you can watch where they do show land, although it's frozen land. It's called, it was one of the early 80s films that I reviewed back in the day. Wrong is Right. Actually stars Sean Connery. Yes. Satan's claws and his helpers. Yeah, that's true, Tabor. That's true. Sooner West remembers Island of Misfit Toys. Yes, he wanted to be a dentist. Hey, KC933, thanks for joining us. But anyway, in summary, nothing up there. Frozen ocean. And we look at some of the early maps of the North Pole when we had our superstitious sailors who mainstream history and historians, and even I myself at one point in time, informed students, didn't exactly know what they were doing, yet somehow they were able to effectively navigate these areas and then also draw charts of them. And then they also had pilots who were able to navigate to and from these areas. But yeah, they were a little bit superstitious, and that's why you had images like this. But some of these maps, you'll see it doesn't really reflect anything. Yes, there's some lands. It looks like we've got Greenland right here. We have this odd island, Friesland, which seems to have just disappeared or, never really existed. Who knows for sure. But in this one, there's really no land up here. All kinds of unique little creatures. Not exactly sure what they represent. But Polus Arcticus. Oh, okay. Where all lines intersect. But we look at other maps, so we go forward to the 1600s, and now we see a little bit more land drawn in here, although we have this odd anomaly, and this comes up a lot, where we actually see Greenland, but you really don't see any break in the land here. It's really odd. So was this their way of depicting it as ice at the time? I mean, very, very odd. It's like, oh, just stop drawing lines there. I guess that's where the land ends. But yet other drawings and other indications show you that there might be a hint of land. Now you'll ask the question, well, how could they know? They were still exploring it. True. But at that point in time, if you hadn't charted something, what are you going to do? Are you going to make a guess, or are you not going to draw anything at all? Well, if we go off of our good friend Eratosthenes and the maps that they found of his in the 1800s, and you might remember he operated much before the 1800s, by a couple thousand years. Well, actually, it was just over 1,000 years. And nobody actually had a map. This was the guy who calculated the circumference of the planet, because remember, he figured out it was a sphere based on shadows. He just never drew a map that actually showed this entire sphere. He drew a very flat map, and it only showed the 3 known continents at the time: Europe, Africa, Asia. And that was that. So, whatever. But then it was this age of exploration that gave us something different, didn't it? Oh, what's this? Word, tartari. What do you think of that? I don't know, maybe I'm just seeing things. Sometimes I have to have a little fun here and there. Susie, we were told in 5th grade Iceland was green and Greenland was ice, and it was suggested the deception in names was to throw off enemies. Nonsense, but we bought it. Ah, yes, Susie, you're right. We're always buying these real estate explanations, aren't we? It's simply good real estate. They were just simply good capitalists back then, or, whatever form of government or economic system that we have. Ah, yes. Tartaria. I don't know why it appears on so many maps, It's just, people just didn't know what they were doing back then. Yeah, no doubt. You may as well just say it's the land of tartar sauce, right? Anyways, so we go on. And now we're moving forward to 1741, so this is a little bit before the explorations of Captain Cook, but oddly enough, we're still showing land up there in this particular area. And isn't it unique how a lot of these maps do depict this as being at the center? And of course, they say hemisphere, les terres, depending on who actually wrote the map and what language it's in, although you can find many maps in multiple languages and who are the experts. What's interesting on this one, though, is it does look like we have the Great Lakes, but that goes back and forth. It does look like California here is actually part of the mainland, but who knows for sure. But in the area in question, again, it's uncertain. Is it land? Is it frozen ocean? I'm not really sure. It's really odd, and this is as late as 1741. But then you go forward to 1818. Ah, yes, the 1800s, the century where everything happened. And again, you still have it, the phenomenon with Greenland, where you really can't see where the land actually connects. Now, why am I showing all these maps? I'm making a point here. The repetitive point is this. They always show Greenland, but they don't really show any sort of actual broken coastline. They don't show where Greenland ends and the Arctic Ocean begins, which is what's supposed to really be up there. They could chart the land all the way up here, and then what? Oh, well, we just didn't chart it. It's all frozen. You might also recall during this time, they were on this quest to look for the Northwest Passage. So, not sure what we're getting at there, are we? Yeah, crystalline pyramids. Who knows what's really up there? Yeah, I love this too, Susie. It's quite interesting to ponder, isn't it? And think about. Atom bomb. Looks like a plethora of flat Earth maps. Well, this is true. Although, unfortunately, because I'm limited to a 2-dimensional screen, when I show you an actual globe, it's only going to look flat. But that's because I have a 2-dimensional screen, Brother Adam. Maybe one day we'll have the technology where I can actually project a globe that'll actually be projected by your screen. Remember, we're supposed to have 3D technology, but for some reason we don't. Sorry, just had to go there. And maybe Greenland borders the mountains around the rock. Oh, that could be, Anne. That could well be. Sky Sage, invisible ice wall. Ooh, interesting possibility there as well. I went on that passage, made a video. Which particular passage are you referring to? Let us know. Now you go a little bit further forward. This is 1872. And again, they just call this northern regions, and it's just all this blank area, just this circle. Kind of like that circle that we saw in the earlier weather map. what exactly is going on with that? And once again, Greenland just runs right up to it. So here we are as late as 1872, and we're still showing uncertain boundaries of land, uncertain boundaries. I mean, what's this going on here? So again, it gives you the impression that there's land up there. At least the people who drew this map seem to have the impression there was land up there. I mean, if I look at that map, that's what I would think. Well, it's not knowing the difference between land and the frozen ocean. Of course, if you watch The Terror, if you read about the Franklin expedition where they were looking for the Northwest Passage, well, they knew that this was an ocean. I guess they were going this way, so they weren't going that far north. But it's all very bizarre. Conflicting informations, conflicting illustrations, conflicting cartography, but all showing the same thing. Where is Greenland? Where does it end? Where's the actual ocean? I guess they just didn't know. And then here you have one from Captain John Ross. He had one of the famous expeditions, and you might recall he was featured briefly in The Terror. If you watch that TV series, he was portrayed by actor Clive Russell. You might better know him as the Blackfish Tully, who had an off-screen death in the awful end of Game of Thrones, but the less said about that, the better. And oddly enough, this was an individual who went on one of these expeditions and had to walk and save their crew. And you might recall The Terror ended that way, where the crew of The Terror had to walk in the Erebus 800 miles. But is that really the case, or were they lost somewhere up here? Because we do have indications that there were crews that were really lost up here, and there's a lot more land up here than we might like to believe. I'm not saying that's a fact. I'm merely stating we have indications. What are your thoughts on that? Sky Sage. Yeah, that was a really good show, The Terror. Did a wonderful job showing the elements of being unknown, had some great characters, and had some great acting in it from everybody. Well, I didn't mean to give you PTSD, Anne. So we won't talk about it anymore, all right? Yeah, lots of cities named in Canada. That's a good observation there, Sissy May. As though they already knew exactly what they were looking at, right? Very, very interesting. But then we look at more contemporary maps, and finally, it looks like we finally have the end of the land of Greenland. But still, we show the North Pole the same way. Well, it's white because it's the North Pole, so we just show it white. Okay, fair enough. And then even in other charts. So keep in mind, they've been exploring this area at this point now for hundreds of years, literally, and yet this is all they have to show for it. Uncertain land boundaries. We don't really know exactly what's up there. And even looking at the modern imagery with our satellites and our other aerial photography platforms that we have, or imaging platforms, or whatever you want to call them, we still don't seem to have a very good idea. It's 2024. At least that's the year we're told it is. You know how I feel about chronology and all that, but that's the year we're told it is. It's been hundreds of years, and this is all the more we know about this? This is all the more we know about this land? Well, there's no land up there. It's just an ocean. Pay no attention to it. Okay. But oddly enough, there was a time when we had quite a heroic exploration focus on it. The end of the 1800s and the early 1900s. It's all very odd. And then this other peculiar thing that you see on a lot of these maps, and I'm only going to show one because I've already shown enough examples and I want to move on to the good stuff, but they always called it the unknown regions. What the heck? Why are they calling this the unknown regions? Or perhaps would you say that this is the most honest map that we've seen so far? The unknown regions. We don't know what's up there. Thoughts on that? Oh my goodness. Yeah, exactly. Plural. Good call out there, Drumstick. You noticed that. Hence why I always say lands. What you got, Tabor? Looks like a spin drip paint art. Yeah, no doubt about it. Hey, Zeus Play, thank you very much for that. It may be there's actually an opening up there. Theory of concentric spheres. Or excuse me, theory of concentric spheres. You're absolutely right. I mean, we don't have any idea. I think that's what we can all agree on. And even if we can't agree on what the exact shape of the land really is, we can certainly agree we don't exactly know what's up there, which is very odd in and of itself. You know, is it hollow? Is it flat? Is it round? Is it all the above? Is it more? Is it less? We don't even know what's up there at what may be the very center of the land. Kathy. Yeah, that would be one heck of a big portal, wouldn't it? I mean, how much land area are you talking about there? Of course, things get even more confusing when we consider such things as Mount Meru and so forth. Ooh, Chassis Nix. If I remember correctly, actor Zac Efron talked about a trip him and his buddies went on to the North Pole, and he showed pictures. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, maybe it was him. Wasn't he in that Australian film Gold? Was that Zac Efron, or am I thinking somebody else? I'm not so good with modern performers. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe I'm just losing it. So, what's our real story? Donut? Yeah, I guess you could consider it a donut. Why not? Ooh, Dyson Sphere entrance. That's an interesting premise, too. So, I mean, really, we just don't know. And Stabulator here, a very beauty place that is being hidden from us. Oh, yeah. No doubt about it. So what is it? Not sure. And you look at any map from anything from 1600 to 1900, and this is what you'll see. Pretty much the same thing. So I think we've established that. This is one from 1875. But you can find hundreds of more maps that show this exact same thing. Where's the boundary of Greenland? I don't know. I can't tell you off this map. Where's the boundary of my brain? I don't know. It's not in my brain anymore. I'm being facetious, but that's the way you feel when you look at enough of these maps. But then, when we go back and we look at the Mercator map, it shows us something up there. 1595, at least that's the date that's attributed to it. Now, who knows for sure? But the Mercator map, which does give us lines of latitude, it does give us coordinates. And oddly enough, in the very middle, we have, at the very center of the pole, the Great Rock, the Magnetic Rock, whatever you want to call it. It has many different names. You can see the name here. And then 4 categories of land, or 4 groups of land. You want to think of them as continents, or the islands? I don't know. I mean, you could even argue that they're just large islands, or it's a large continent, and these are great rivers. There's many different accounts. Some accounts say that 2 of these rivers flow inward, 2 flow outward. Some say that all 4 flow inward. Where do they all go if they flow inward? And then, of course, you have the accounts of the unique inhabitants up there, the pygmies, other creatures. Now, Mercator was a serious map maker. And if somebody didn't explore this or report this, why would he actually draw this? Now, of course, there's all kinds of unique intellectual cheetah flips, historians, and then, of course, the historians of cartography, and then looking at the Mappa Mundi, which is a whole separate study of medieval maps, where academia and scholars go to all sorts of unique lengths to try to explain this incredible discrepancy. And between all of us, I'm actually quite amazed that we're even able to see this. I don't wonder if the reason that we're allowed to see this is to put some other impression in our mind, because as we know, we're given conflicting impressions, at bare minimum duality, but many, many other options if they really don't want us to know something about a particular area of land. But what are your thoughts on Mercator's little display here of the North Polar region? Could it be that this is the most accurate? What's that question there from Albie? What is all that land around? That's a very good question. Is it flowing water? Is it another ice ocean? It looks like a cell. Ooh, that's an interesting observation there, RB. Yeah. Ah, yes. Rupris nigra. Many different ways to pronounce it. We're actually going to look at a possible picture of it. Yes, believe it or not, we have a picture of it. Or do you want to think of it as Mount Meru? Mount Meru. Make sure you pronounce it properly, Aurelian. I can't pronounce anything properly. You should know that by now. Dallas. It's probably accurate. Modern descriptions probably aren't. A lot of indications for that. And Susie here with a good comment. Yes, a serious cartographer would not discredit himself by falsifying a map. Exactly. New World over. Let's see this comment here. I think Earth and its outer rings are Atlantis. Yeah, that could be too. But going back to the thought process that a cartographer would not discredit themselves by showing this, you're absolutely right. So in other words, somebody reported this. Now, you would think that if we go off of the official history, we're talking about legitimate explorers who had heroic and legendary reputations. They couldn't just go off and make false reports and make all this up. So why would Mercator draw this? I'm not really sure. And then, of course, we look at the close-up here. Now, there's some statements that the very rock itself is magnetic. And yet we do know there are magnetic properties up there. Of course, why is it called the North Polar region? Why is it called the North Pole? It has nothing to do with it being the center or the top. It has everything to do with the magnetic field. Does it? Or again, is it conflicting? Because if you ask different people, you'll get 5 different answers. Yes. Again, many different accounts by what's actually up there. But oddly enough, even to this day, we can say with total certainty that we have no idea what's up there. I've never been anywhere close to there. I don't know anybody who's been anywhere close to there. I don't know of anybody who's been close there. We do have the expeditions, and we do have the official quote-unquote heroic expeditions. Admiral Byrd went there when he was Commander Byrd. Remember, he was U.S. Navy, but, same thing. Pay grade 05. And then we also had old Roald Amundsen from Norway. And how did he get there? In an airship. Yeah, I know, I'm leaning ahead a little bit. That's okay. I think when you see something like this, it really inspires the imagination, because what if there is something like that up there? Yeah, the very funnel of this creation. I mean, who knows for sure? Different accounts, different possibilities that make it quite unique. Now, this is the less well-known, but now much more known, Urbano Monte map. Urbano Monte was more or less a contemporary Mercator. Some say he was before, some say he was after. Again, goes off the chronology. But oddly enough, he displays land here in the North Polar region. Very clear and distinct land. And many other alternative researchers have used Urbano Monte's maps, and I did an exploration on it called Charts of the Old World. That was well over a year ago. Wow, time's going by so fast. Doesn't matter. Anyways, oddly enough, in the middle here, why does that symbol look kind of familiar? Where have I seen that before? I'm not sure. Keeps coming up. Don't know why. But he shows that there's land here. And oddly enough, depicts Greenland running more what we would think of as west or southwest to northeast, or actually more west to east. I mean, it's kind of curving around, so who knows for sure. But very strange. Let's get a better look at this. There we go. Much better image here. And yet you can see that all these little oceans, waterways, they're all labeled. Isn't that peculiar? I mean, we very clearly see Greenland right here. And we can see what's now the United States. All the way over to Alaska. And what's this land right here? Very peculiar. But then looking at these lands, I mean, in Urbano Monte, same thing as Mercator. Why would he just draw all these lands up here? Because I don't care if I get executed. Anything to make a dime, right? I don't care if I destroy my reputation. I mean, they got Nova Zembla here. I know I'm horribly mispronouncing it. That's okay. For those of you who don't know, official history says that's where the Soviet Union detonated the Tsar Bomba, the shockwave that ran around the planet 3 times. Or, in this case, what was the term they had for this? The planisphere. So, planet, planisphere, plane. It kind of all looks like the same thing when it's on a map. I'm not saying I know what it is. I'm merely stating it looks like the same thing when it's on a map. It's kind of like those old episodes of Star Trek where they would show 3-dimensional space on a 2-dimensional projection. Much like how I'm still showing you 3-dimensional space on a 2-dimensional projection in 2024, right? Oh gosh, I'm full of it. Ooh, Veronica. So is that rock in Mecca that people idolize a piece of that North Pole rock? Who knows? It might be. Or might be related to it, some way, shape, or form. Oh, I am Kairos. Planetarium. Yes, why do we see so many planetariums? Well, RB, maybe that's just a way of saying I need to do more explorations of these maps, right? Hey, Jamie, thanks for joining us. You're right at the high time. So it's very odd. We have 2 map makers here who are showing us that there is land up there. There are labeled areas of water. There are labeled lands. There are labeled peoples even up there. What exactly is going on? And why is it we have to go back about 500 years, 400 to 500 years to actually find depictions? And yet ever since then, it's all blank. We don't know. Even a current weather map. Well, this 8-pointed star is completely covered. I don't know why. And then, of course, here I pulled a satellite image, a very recent one, again from our friends at NASA. And here's what they show us in that same area. in the North Polar region? Oh, yeah, it's all just boring sea ice. See, there's Greenland. That's all it is. Oh, those are clouds. Let me make sure I label that for you. Those are clouds. Scandinavia. There's the Russian Federation. Oh, look, the wildfire smoke from Canada. Funny, I thought it was all blowing south because it seemed to be over Minnesota all the time, at least when I was driving through there. But I guess it was going north here. Whatever. But yeah, that's all you have up there. Sea ice, right? Arcane chronotopologies. Earth expansion land sinks, expanding concave cellular Earth. Only densest lands survive. It may reemerge at pole flip. That's very interesting. Quite a premise. Yeah, I am Kairos. Sea ice, right? You're absolutely right. Sea ice, seafood. Good one. Hey, Gen X to the 7th power. Yeah, conveniently overcast. Unlike the earlier image where there wasn't a cloud in sight. So I guess you have one of two extremes. You have a ton of clouds or you have no clouds. Yeah, that's just what I see every time I look in the sky, right? Anyways. So, oddly enough, in much more recent times that you may remember, the motoring show out of the United Kingdom, Top Gear, which at the time was one of my favorites because back in the day I was quite a self-proclaimed performance driver. Yeah, actually, I just enjoyed driving. They were going to drive up to the North Pole. And there was an episode called the Arctic Special where Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and I think Richard Hammond got lost or something happened to him or he didn't do it. But anyway, here's the question I have for you. Did anybody see the episode and did they actually make it to the North Pole? And by the way, which North Pole were they going to? Because we've got a couple, you know? Hey, Lawrence, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. You picked one great exploration to come back on. Oh, that's right. Hammond was on a dog sleigh. I forgot about that. Thanks, Drumstick. It's been a while. No, didn't see the episode. Yeah, that's okay, Lori. Well, bottom line up front, where they actually went to. And so what you have here we have the North Pole, the geographical North Pole. And these red dots are the magnetic North Pole. And you might notice it's been shifting. And you might remember that very difficult to release exploration we did where we talked about the North Magnetic Pole shifting. The Top Gear crew did their little expedition in 2007, but they did not go to the magnetic pole of 2007. They went to the magnetic pole of 1997. So right here you have the 80 degrees north northing. Yeah, that's a military terminology. But anyway, you might recall Jeremy Clarkson's latitude reading. They only went 78 degrees. So, in other words, they didn't actually go anywhere close to the North Pole. You know, I'm not criticizing the crew, the fact that they actually went and did something like that. And, Matt LeBlanc would never go close to the North Pole or, probably anywhere north of Canada in his whole life. Man, they really destroyed that show. Sorry, I'm saying too much. But anyway, they didn't go anywhere north of this point right here. You can even see the coordinates. So, was that because they weren't able to? Was there nothing to go to? Why can nobody actually go here? Why do the only accounts we have are submarines that are submerging in the middle of the pack ice? And that's all we really have. Does anybody actually go up there? What's really up there? And yes, they even admitted it, on the BBC in the press release at the time. No, they didn't go that far north. There were still settlements that were north of us. And yeah, Alert, Eureka, still north of where the crew actually went. Great episode, great expedition, but isn't it interesting? Oh, yeah. Well, with that, I think we're going to take our first break. We're going to transition into looking at some closer images of the North Pole. And we're also going to go back and look at some myths of it. So prior to going on our little 2-minute intermission here, please hit that like button and thank you everybody for joining us. And this is going to get even more interesting because oddly enough, you're going to find some more overlaps or some more coincidences, depending how you look at it, with previous explorations we've had. So please stick around, take that 2-minute break, recharge, get a drink, whatever you need to do, and we'll see you back in 2 minutes, and we're going to take a closer look. All right, we are back. Let's get the Monty Python music off and get back to it. So let me transition images here real quick. And thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to take a look at some images of the North Pole. Although you might be surprised by our first image. And if anybody recognizes it, extra points for you because you're definitely a true fan of the channel. All right, can everybody see this? What do we have here? Oh, here comes Santa Claus. Yeah, I know. November came fast, didn't it? Of course, depending where you are in the land, because maybe the North Polar region doesn't mean anything to you, and it's all good if it doesn't. Oh, yes. Kroll, Kroll, Kroll. Right you are. Lots of fans here. Does anybody remember what this object was called from Kroll? Yes, it's Kroll. Come on, I got to throw in either a Kroll or a Willem Dafoe reference in every exploration. Hey, Julia, thanks for joining us. Oh, you know. Like I said, I wish I could do it at all times of the day. Hey, Dallas right there is already ahead of it. Looks like Shiprock, yes. So, in the film Kroll, this was referred to as the Black Fortress of the Beast. That was the antagonist in the film. Quite an interesting film, I can certainly recommend it. But anyway, yes, it does bear a striking resemblance to Shiprock in New Mexico. Why am I showing this? Because, for whatever reason, it kind of reminds me of that rock that's depicted, displayed, drawn in the middle of the North Polar region. So, is there a connection? It's even more odd that in the film Kroll, they actually showed the Black Fortress jumping or transporting because it would disappear and reappear in other areas of the land. Quite an intriguing premise. And they had it basically in a tundra frozen region. So, quite interesting. Although, who's to say that's actually what's up there? Because, as we said, we don't know. We don't have any idea. Of course we don't. Anyways. So the other phenomenon that people tend to have are what's called the Northern Lights. Now, do the Northern Lights really represent anything? Is it really just fireworks in the sky? Or is it, as scientists tell us, it's merely the effect of those solar flares? Ah, yes, our mighty friend the sun doing cool things in the night sky. Or if you may think they are a very pretty phenomenon to observe, and the further north you go, it is easier to observe them. And I remember when I was in Alaska, I saw some wondrous northern lights. You can see some pretty decent ones in Minnesota, and not just there, but all across the lands. I'm just talking about places I've been recently. But any thoughts behind them? Ooh. RB, aliens. Yeah, why not? These ones kind of look like aliens, don't they? I could see why somebody would think that. But then, oddly enough, they're also displayed, drawn in different forms of art through the years. And you have really unique phenomenons. Now, is it from some sort of magnetic interference? Is there other possible explanations? Who knows for sure? But they always interested me because you can find them drawn in paintings and artwork from this entire time frame that we talked about. You remember the hundreds of years that we spent exploring the North Polar region, yet not really having much to show for it. And still to this day not having much to show for it. But we have all these artistic renderings, paintings, drawings, sketches, whatever you want to call them, that show this unique phenomenon. And yet, oddly enough, sometimes they show even more interesting phenomena in the sky. Now, you might recall our Nuremberg celestial event from the 1500s that we explored several months ago. Could it be alluding to that? Possibly. Or is it, the people who were so brilliant they could build these buildings, but so superstitious and so foolish that they just saw crazy things in the sky and they couldn't handle plagues? I don't know. It's what I like to call a conflicting account. But it's safe to say there is something with the Northern Lights. Now, oddly enough, when you look at some other medieval drawings or artwork, they try to say that this represents the understanding of the North and the South Pole. Or in other words, the magnetic properties of the land, the planet. Of course, historians and scholars go back and forth depending on when you ask. People didn't know that the land was round back then. Actually, they did know. And to suggest otherwise is to say that you don't really know. I'm always interested when we know what people were thinking back in the 14 and the 1500s. How in the heck do we know? We don't even know what people today are thinking, but we knew what people back in the 1500s were thinking. just don't even ask. Yes, exactly, Veronica. A conundrum of all sorts. But anyways, I know I'm making a very elaborate point with it, but it's comical to me. How do you know what anybody was thinking from any time frame? Well, we know what they thought, we know what they believed. Yeah. Well, as someone who taught history for a very long time, I can tell you that what we think we thought they knew changes depending on what we think we know now. Or, as we're told it's called historical revision. It's happening a lot today. It's happening even with events as recent as World War II. Anyways, make of it what you will. Now, there is some accounts, that what we think of as the North Polar region, according to some myth. So again, nothing official, no historical chronology here, which, maybe in your own mind gives you more credibility. There are accounts that Avalon, the kingdom of Arthur, actually had origins up in the North Polar region. Thoughts on that? Has anybody heard that myth? Or is it really just that? Just some crazy myth or just some article up there? I mean, what if you actually had castles up there at one point in time? KC933. They were so less educated, yet we can't recreate the things they did. Wonderful observation. Yes, I love to highlight that one myself quite frequently. Yeah, and some people have heard of it, some people haven't. So it really depends. What you got, Ishko? They have no clue what their wives are thinking, but they know what people in the 1500s did and thought. Oh, that's an even better example. Yeah, person that you live with every day, you have no idea what they're thinking, but I knew what Charlemagne was thinking. Yeah, I actually did a thesis on it. My goodness, was it bad. At least I can admit my mistakes, right? But anyways, a myth, an account. But imagine that. Imagine some accounts of a land, the very center, or a distant land, which really was the origin, because it's always that question. Where did we originate from? Where did we start? We don't really know. Depending on which scientists you ask, they'll tell you, well, we came from Africa. Well, we came from this part of Asia. Well, this group came from here. This group came from there. But there are a couple mythical accounts that do relate to origin stories from this unknown land, the North Polar region. And there are many artistic depictions that show fabulous lands up there, that show unique effects. And there's even different myths. One of these myths of Avalon that we've explored before actually precedes it, at least if you try to line up the myths in a chronological timeline, which I'll admit it's very problematic. But you might recall when we did the exploration on the Tuatha De Danann, the deities of Ireland, although a lot of people argue, were they deities or were they just very advanced humans? I mean, conflicting accounts, it goes back and forth. It's a myth. I don't know. But they were said to have gone to this area that was beyond the known, and perhaps they escaped a reset event. Who knows for sure? But when you look into the account of the Tuatha De Danann, and I'm trying to pronounce it properly, but were they deities? Were they more advanced humans? Because it seems like they either had abilities that almost seem supernatural, or perhaps they just had advanced technology that when they returned to the land after the reset appeared to be supernatural. Thoughts on that, if you recall the Tuatha De Danann? Good evening, Spirit. Good to see you. Ooh, CFH 90. Is the Dark Tower up there? Yeah, maybe, for all we know. Don't know for sure. Yeah, the old ones. Who knows what's really up there. But I always found it intriguing that there were the accounts that there were people who went up there. And there's even more modern artwork on the Tuatha De Danann. Yeah, I'm being a little facetious here because we have no idea what they were or what they looked like. And oddly enough, when you look at some of the accounts and you look at some of the artwork, you'll get some really interesting interpretations. And just looking at those interpretations themselves, I think that's fascinating to me, because were these people actual deities, or were they actually just much more advanced human beings? And not just more advanced in terms of the technology that they possessed, but perhaps more advanced in ways that we can't fully understand right now. Perhaps they had a better integration of their spiritual side with their physical side. Or in other words, they had really mastered the concept of metaphysics and things that we consider alchemy. Maybe it was something they manipulated at will. As easily as you can snap your fingers, they seem to have those capabilities. And so that's why there's some very interesting depictions. And it's very interesting that they were said to have gone to this area, this North Polar region, when hard times had hit Ireland. And you can go back and look at that exploration, or you can research the Tuatha De Danann on your own and find out some of their magical objects and some of their properties. Quite intriguing. And of course, the way they fall into the legend. And defying the king of the world, Daredon. You can go back and look at that mythical account. Oddly enough, though, I've always found it unique that Irish mythology, for whatever reason, never caught on, was never popular. I mean, you could say that. I don't like using that word. It just never seemed to be something that really caught on across the land, even though when you actually read into it, and if you take it in the same way as Greek mythology, there are so many interesting dimensions to it. So, Hey, Polly. Well, I'm glad you could join us. Surprise, surprise. So anyway, that's the account of a couple groups of people, the possible origin of Avalon, King Arthur, again a myth, and another myth of the Tuatha De Danann in the North Polar region that might have a little bit more behind it. Anyway, let's go on and take a look at our actual explorer who got there. And he's a very intriguing looking fellow. Roald Amundsen, and I know I'm not pronouncing that properly, the Norwegian explorer. And you can find plenty of pictures of good old Mr. Amundsen here, and I'm not going to show all of them because he has the same interesting look in his eyes. But oddly enough, he officially reached the North Pole in an airship, and whatever else but the Norge. Now, conflicting accounts, they say the Norge was a semi-rigid airship because you sure as hell aren't taking a balloon up there. But oddly enough, when you look a little closer, it almost seems to have the properties of a full rigid airship. I mean, I don't know, I wasn't there. And who knows if they actually got up there or they didn't, but they said they did. And why would anybody say they did when they didn't, right? But isn't it interesting? Yes, Sky Sage. And that's going to be tabbed for one of the future explorations too, to try to look into all those different origins, because there are multiple overlapping accounts. RB, total old world tech. If you're going to reach the off-limits lands, or the lands that are hard to reach, this is the way to do it. Atom bomb, that's a good one. Seems like a hot air story. Yeah, I mean, rest assured, I would not want to take a balloon up there. Ugh, that would be pretty rough. Hey, my bailiwick zone. Isn't the Norge John Belushi? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I don't know. And apparently that seemed to be the only way to reach it. Here's another picture of good old Roald here. Yeah, looks like a really happy individual. But I mean, I guess if you spend your whole life in these extreme lands, it's going to take a toll. But, you know, it was during that heroic age of exploration, 1890s to the early 1900s. Now, oddly enough, here's a picture of the three polar stars, as they were called. Oddly enough, this picture is from 1913. It's a very auspicious year in American history. So many wonderful things happened in 1913. The will of the people spoke, and they were glorified and granted the Federal Reserve and a federal income tax, all in the same year. And that was to offset any future depressions. Well, we know how that ended up. And we have Roald over here. Oh, look how nicely dressed he is and how cleaned up he is. But he still has that same look in his eyes. And then over here we have Shackleton. And then we have Perry. Nice mustache. Oddly enough, if you look closely at this globe that they have, you might notice there's some discrepancies with it. But we're not going to go into that now because that's going to hijack the exploration a little bit. Another exploration for another time. You know, not to do a J.J. Abrams storytelling move on you there, but we will get to it. So, and then, of course, who could forget our good friend, the great polar explorer himself, the man, the myth, the legend. Who are we looking at? Yeah, I don't have him labeled, but we sure talk about this guy a lot, don't we? Oh, goodness. I think they don't get access. They'd like to, but don't. You know, you might be right on that one. Yes, you are correct. Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd. Of course, when this photo was taken, he was only Lieutenant Commander. Richard Evelyn Byrd. Oh, by the way, my grandma's name was Evelyn, so you know what? Same as Admiral Byrd's middle name. Ooh, there's another connection there. Oh, get going right there. get going. Another connection. Yeah, that's right. Bird is the word. But yes, our great American polar explorer who went north, went south, went everywhere. So, he's a great transition point. So that's it for the North Polar region. And as we transition to the South Polar region, please hit that like button. And Bird is actually the perfect individual to transition on because guess what? He went to both. So we'll take a little look at the South Polar region. And you might recall we have explored that a little bit more extensively. And hopefully this image displays and I don't have any technical difficulties because I was kind of expecting some to come now. Can everybody see that? Please tell me we don't have any technical difficulties. Julia, yeah, that's a great point. Evelyn, Beverly, Ashley. Yeah, quite a few. Oh, yes. Okay, good. We can all see it. Oh, yeah, don't worry. We're going to get to high jump. So here we have our early map here showing us what was at the southern polar region. And let me make sure I go to that banner. So the South Polar region. And you might recall that they called it Terra Australis Incognita. Well, they got a little different name here, but lands unknown to the south. And you might recall when we did the exploration focused on our great explorer, James Cook, he didn't actually find Antarctica. But he did prove that Terra Australis Incognita didn't exist. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't. But, that's what official history says. Now, oddly enough, when you look at the same maps of the southern polar region, they look quite a bit like the northern polar region. Look at that. There's absolutely nothing down there. Oh, we got Australia, we got South America, but it's just an ocean. I mean, were they going to try to say that this was another icy ocean? What do you think of this? Yeah. KC933, why do I always think of Australia as being warm? Well, good question. Maybe you should check out the new series Territory, KC933. They actually do feature some good landscapes. I can't attest to the plot, but they do show the landscapes of the Northern Territory in Australia quite beautifully. Lawrence, the South Pole is a wall of ice around the world. Maybe. Who knows for sure? Odd enough that they show the exact same thing that we saw in the north, though, wouldn't you say? On these contemporary maps. There's just nothing down there. Oh, it looks like we've got some land shown here on this one in the southern region. This is 1872. So, this was, well, a good 100 years after Captain Cook had proven that there wasn't a continent called Terra Australis down there, but he missed finding the Arctic, or the Antarctic, I should say. The Antarctic. So many conflicting accounts. And then, of course, here on the Bird Antarctic expedition, oddly enough, you can still find examples of that game and so much information here on this one little image. And of course, I'm referring to the board game concerning Bird's Antarctic expedition. Good old Operation High Jump. And yet, oddly enough, we still show this white circle. What's our obsession with showing this white circle for poles? Look, if it's going to be a North Pole or a South Pole, it's going to be a very nondescript white circle. And there's not going to be anything there. It's just a plateau. It's all empty, barren ice plains as far as the eye can see. Yeah, I'm not really sure. RB, my soul is like the North Pole, has a hole in it. Well, that's a good one, RB. Yeah, exactly, Jamie. I mean, that's the impression it gives, isn't it? Oh, yes, and they did have a plane crashing in Operation High Jump. And if you haven't seen the Operation High Jump exploration, look up Operation High Jump, the saga, little 2-hour exploration that we did on Operation High Jump. But yet the early maps showed the same thing. Terra Australis Incognita. Nothing down there, I don't know. There may be land down there, there may not be, but it reflects what we saw with the North Polar region. Very, very odd. As though they didn't know what to make of it. And then finally, in that heroic age of exploration, the 1890s to 1920, 30, 40, depending on your time frame. Oh yeah, I guess there was a little bit more land with it. And then we had to explore it. and you need some guy named Richard Evelyn Byrd to go explore both. Although it should be noted that Roald Amundsen explored both too, because can't do one pole, you got to do both. Now, oddly enough, in recent articles, there's a lot of concern about the fact that the weather is changing in Antarctica. Got to be careful about the terms I use here. And because of it, it's no longer frozen. Well, as someone who went down there 20 years ago, I can assure you that there are numerous areas that look like this, at least around McMurdo, oddly enough. Now, is that because it always looked like that, or is it because there's something very different with that land than we might think? And indeed, it is really odd down there. And I can assure you that, no, going down there, you don't really get any more answers. In fact, you get more questions. I know, surprise, surprise. Oh, Northern Pole, just frozen water. Southern Pole has land. Yeah, officially. But is that the case? No, RB, that's not me. That's not me. Learned my lesson when I played games with that before, so. But then, of course, this is the official image that we get. And again, it's very odd. Because why are these the best official images that we get of any pole, north or south? And then, of course, we have a picture of Richard Byrd in Operation High Jump. And here he is smoking, looks to be his corncob pipe, like he's MacArthur or something. What was it with corncob pipes in the 1940s? I don't know. But very, very odd. Richard Byrd, quite an interesting figure. Affiliated with so many explorations and discoveries and considered one of the great explorer heroes. But when Operation High Jump came along, things seemed to get a little bit more interesting. And you might recall from the Operation High Jump exploration, all the U.S. service members that went down there were sworn to secrecy. And in fact, Byrd himself was sworn to secrecy. That's not a conspiracy. That's not a conspiracy theory. You can actually find copies of the orders that say that. And you can actually find copies of the orders that said that as early as the 1930s, long before this variation of Operation High Jump in 1947. So quite intriguing. South Magnetic Polar Party. Interesting. And again, showing some of the maps where the camps were set up. But then, oddly enough, you can find in the later 1800s, it seemed as though they did have a better idea of what was actually down there. But again, what exactly is this? Is this showing land, and is this supposed to be an ocean? I mean, it says it right here. Antarctic Ocean. Well, what exactly is going on? Why is there so much confusion? Well, because they were exploring it. That would be the mainstream answer. Okay, sure. But why do they go back and forth on both areas? And keep in mind, here's what's really bizarre about this. And there's no explaining this. There's all this effort. There's all this heroic age of exploration to fully map and understand and chart these areas. And yet, even to this day, we can still talk about them and be completely uncertain what's down there. You can even go down there, or maybe I should say at least told that's where you went. I mean, it looked like McMurdo. I thought I was at McMurdo. Was I? I don't know. But yet still have all these questions about it. Still have all this uncertainty. Why is it so hard? Oh. PJCC West, not actually safe aviation. Yeah, you may be onto something there. I mean, I don't know. The satellites can't give us good imagery. Oh, a compass. You know what? I actually did not have a classic handheld magnetic compass. I had a GPS system. Yeah, that's a good point. I wish I did. It was before I thought of such things, reality checkmate. Before I had the eyes that I do now. So who really knows for certain? Now let me see here. I had some more images. Oh, I rolled that ahead. So again, we have the same questions that we do. We see the same phenomenon with this age of exploration with both the North Polar and the South Polar regions, the Arctic, the Antarctic, the Arctica. Remember, that's what they called the land. Oh, by the way, there was actually references, and you can still find them to this day. The landmass in the North Polar region, the Arctica. Yes, that's what they called it. So very fascinating. They have those kind of accounts. All right. So, the true lands beyond. And oddly enough, our story again begins with good old Admiral Byrd. So stand by 1 second. We're going to switch up images here real quick. And boy, have we got a good story for you on this one. And if you haven't seen the Operation High Jump Saga exploration, I highly recommend it. So, can everybody see this image so far? Yeah, you're right, Adam. It really does go to outer space in a way. Anyways, so we are looking at the USS Leyte Gulf, an Essex-class aircraft carrier from 1947. The Leyte Gulf was the... Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm completely off. Philippine Sea. Wrong Essex-class carrier. The USS Philippine Sea. Excuse me. See, I make mistakes too. And this is a picture of it in the Panama Canal. And you might notice that it has some very, very large planes on the entire flight deck. Now, a couple oddities here. So this is 1947, and official history tells us this is when the United States was in its period of disarming after World War II, or reductions. Demobilizing the great military machine that the United States had built. But yet the United States managed to build 24 Essex-class aircraft carriers. These were fleet carriers. These were not the escort carriers. These were the full-tonnage fleet carriers. And they committed one of these to Operation High Jump. Very odd. And you might look at these planes, and these were the largest cargo planes that they had at the time. Same class of plane that had flown over the hump when they when they flew over the Himalayas as part of that supply operation during World War II. Now, strangely enough, you can find plenty of maps from the 1800s that show the flat concept. Oddly enough, for people who knew that the land was round or spherical, whatever you want to call it, but you can find no shortage of maps from the 1800s. Well, they'll just say it's because of the Flat Earther Society. It's just odd to me. But you go beyond it, and you'll find all sorts of different connections behind what's really going on. Now, this is really peculiar. So this is stated to be flying over the hump. But this image that we're looking at is attributed, oddly enough, to the library from Operation High Jump. Now, here's where things get a little screwy. Is this actually an image from Operation High Jump in the Antarctica, or is this one of the planes flying over the Himalayas? It's very odd because it's the exact same type of planes that they used for both operations. And why would they need these kind of planes? Because flying over the hump, the official hump was the Himalayas, it was very difficult. It was very difficult for the 10th Air Force that carried out the mission. The intention behind the mission was to supply the Chinese army and Chiang Kai-shek, and we saw, well, that worked out for the United States, didn't we? But anyway, they flew this mission and supplied them as they were fighting the Japanese. It was very difficult to make the flight. But we have this image that's attributed to Operation High Jump. Where on earth in the Antarctic would you find mountains that are anywhere close as high as the Himalayas? Or the elevations anywhere as close as the same? Yet you have this image. And I recall being down there, and you do actually see mountains that look very, very tall. Now, could it be a visual effect? Could it all just be a mistake? Sure. But it is odd. It's another one of those strange anomalies. Yeah, I mean, we really don't know. Did they actually have to fly over something? Well, and that's another good point, RB. I mean, what are they? Are they giant mountains? Are they giant something else? Is it an ice wall? Is it some other complete form of physical existence we don't even understand? So again, you get more questions than answers. Now, oddly enough, if you're actually looking to understand how the realms may exist, I'm using this rather bizarre picture. Is it all a simulation? Is it overlapping realities? Are there overlapping planes of existence? Is there something even beyond our physical understanding that we could never display on a map? Is that why we have lands that constantly shift? Is that why we have lands in the North Pole that are no longer there or no longer shown? Did they disappear? Is that why we just find islands off Japan, even with all of our great modern technology? Or is it all just a mistake? I don't know. But oddly enough, I just wanted to show you this map because this actually shows you the airlift that they did to get into China from the northwest side of Burma, and how they had to fly over the Himalayas at that time. Same kind of planes. Okay, the moment you've all been waiting for. Has anybody heard of Terra Infinita? And I'm sure you all have, because we have covered it before. Ah, yes, okay. I had a feeling you did. Anyway, concept drawn a couple years back, very, very creative, although it is actually based on earlier maps. Now, here's the thing. Before you get wrapped around the bend that, yes, this is confirming that this is all flat, we really don't know. We don't know what it is. But what I appreciate about it is an attempt to depict other lands, the lands beyond. The lands that we know, the 7 continents. By the way, I noticed earlier in the comments you were talking about the 7 golden cities. There is another theory I haven't gotten to yet that talks about each of the golden cities, one being in each continent. Isn't that an intriguing concept? Hey, look at this. Ocean of the Tartars. Ooh, cool. The Ancestral Republic. Germania. That's an older one. The Norse Ocean. Atlantis. So again, giving you an idea, and now I'm not showing this entire map. You know, if you are familiar with the Nos Confuden maps, or if you're familiar with Terra Infinita, you know that there's a heck of a lot more to this. I'm just showing a little blow-up of it. Namely, out of respect to the person that actually created this back in 2022. But very creative. Very interesting way to actually look at all the lands. Wouldn't you say? Ah, look at that, Vaughn. Yes. 7 kings, 7 cities, 7 continents. Ah, Ooh, KC933. It's way too much to comprehend. It may well be. It may well be. But isn't it funny how, and I'll use that word very directly, isn't it funny how each of our belief systems all revolve around that? That there's so much to existence that we can't possibly begin to comprehend it. Because if you go off of, we're on a planet, or flying through space, well, we're in this universe, and it's so tremendously large you can't begin to comprehend it. Or if you think it's flat, we're in this infinite flat plane. It's so large you can't begin to comprehend it. Or if it's an entirely different existence, a tesseract, 4-dimensional, overlapping realities, you again can't begin to comprehend it. Problem, problem, problem. Now, this is an earlier depiction of the world beyond the ice wall. And no doubt this inspired the recent works that we just looked at. But as I recall, I remember seeing this probably about 10, 12 years ago. I did actually use this as a depiction because of some of the lands that were depicted beyond. Now, some people think that what the Antarctica represents is an ice wall. Maybe so. And that beyond those lands are other lands, other continents. And you have these gates here. The Serpent's Gate, the Tiger's Gate, the Sentinel's Gate. Now, there are other ways to interpret this. Oh, at least I forget the Leviathan's Gate. How fitting. But there are other ways you could interpret this. Maybe it's not necessarily all a flat plane. Maybe these gates represent something else. Maybe there's different physical locations that you could access them. Maybe they're the actual portals we've been talking about or looking through. And that's how you access these other lands. And what's even more interesting, if you go back to the Terra Infinita example, is they've got other lands that are actually named after what we think of as the planets, like the land of Mars, the land of Jupiter. Very interesting, isn't it? Huh, Shangri-La. There it is. Hey, look, we found Shangri-La. But going back to this earlier concept, you look and you understand that there are multiple ways to see it. It doesn't have to be all flat. It doesn't have to be all spherical. Or maybe the reality is it's round. I'm still amazed at how many people back in the day thought that orbis meant spherical. No, it means circular. And isn't it interesting how on the Mercator and the Urbano Monte maps we looked at, things were drawn in circles? What a coincidence, wouldn't you say? Hey, thanks, Sooner West. I appreciate that. And welcome to the new members. Oh, Ring World. Yeah, that's a great example. And Atom Bomb, dome-shaped. Yeah, not cube-shaped like the Borg, dome-shaped. So it gives you a whole new appreciation when you go to a planetarium. Ooh, there's a good comment. Banff Local. That layout is very reminiscent of the concentric circle symbol in Rose-Croix Scottish Rite masonry. Another coincidence, right? Castle and pasture. Sun and moon move in circles. Sun's heat determines shape. That's possible. There's a lot of different elements to this that really transcend the mind. And so you start to understand that if you look at things different ways, if you're capable of seeing different perspectives, it becomes a little bit easier to grasp this infinite existence that we may have. Ooh, the volcanic waste. Isn't that interesting? Maybe that's like the land of Mordor. Who knows? Now I go back to the old C-47 here. So this was the same plane that they used to fly over the hump in the Himalayas, but then also the plane that they use as part of Operation High Jump. Why the heck would you need a plane like this if you're just going down to what we think of as the Antarctic continent, and there's no mountains that are anywhere close to the Himalayas? Why would you need that kind of capability? Again, why would you need an aircraft carrier? It's not an escort carrier. It's not one of those cargo ships that converted to an aircraft carrier. It was a fleet carrier. Ship of the line, a capital ship. And so does it lend to this possibility? Does it allude to this concept of these multiple overlapping forms of existence? Is it beyond just a physical limitation? And this is really where we cross that big boundary in the explorations. Yes, I try to keep things grounded, but at the same time, I always want to keep my mind and your minds open to the possibilities that there are other forms of existence. That maybe there's a little bit of element of truth in all the theories that we have, or all the forms of existence. And maybe, just maybe, there's actual truth in all the possibilities of what the shape of the land actually is. And the reason that we don't comprehend it is because we're not supposed to. Everything is kept divided. Very effectively divided at that. Vaughn, it makes sense our realm is the North Pole with 4 rivers, 4 exits. We can't go there because we're already there. Ooh, that's very interesting. Yes, and I could definitely see that too. I am Kairos. On the back of the $1 bill, are those the mountains of Antarctica behind the pyramid? Ooh, good question. What are we showing on our currency? I just don't know. It does look like that though, doesn't it? I can see why you'd see that. Maybe we'll just have to look at U.S. currency on some exploration, huh? Yes. Last bird expedition may cause dispute by 4 nations over Antarctic claims. How South Polar lands are staked out. Why on earth would anybody want to stake out a big giant ice continent in the middle of nowhere that has no strategic value? You see, we subvert this by saying, well, it's the whole flat earth, round earth, spherical earth argument. No. Why in the heck was there this international dispute over who was staking out these lands? What strategic value is there to these lands? That never made any sense. The treaty never made any sense, and not to mention this treaty was signed during the high point of the Cold War, when the United States and the Soviet Union were threatening total conflict every moment of every day. But they managed to rather quickly agree upon this. Even though in this little article you see here, may cause dispute over Antarctic claims. Yeah, because there's so many wonderful things down there, right? I mean, officially, you're nowhere close to the United States or the Soviet Union, or any of their interests at the time. You can't affect shipping lanes down there. Officially, there's no natural resources that were worthwhile to gather from there, although Admiral Byrd said otherwise. But, Admiral Byrd said all kinds of things. It doesn't mean they were true. But it's very odd, isn't it? When you look at this, well, it has a lot of strategic value. We need to defend it. Yeah, exactly, I am Kairos. How many uncontested treaties are there? It is very, very odd. We don't even have to look into all the other theories about what's going on down there. Just looking at the mainstream account and just comparing it to what's happening now, none of it adds up. None of it makes any sense. Good one, Atomic. Good one. Excuse me. I'm laughing a lot more at that one than I should. Lisa, how would they know what the land really looks like from the ocean? Did they use the moon as a projector? Oh, very good question. Who knows? Oh, getting some good comments here. Saint Pally Girl. Why don't any of those other lands have ice rings surrounding them? And do they have a magnetic mountain in their center? Oh, they may. Who knows? Who knows how we access them, and who knows what the nature of them really is? No, not at all. It can't be that. Don't say that. Hey, Miss Liz. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Ishko, the internet is still full of idiots who think you have options if you want to travel to Antarctica. Yeah, well, and even if you do get the privilege of going down there, guess what? You're not exactly on a sightseeing tour. You're not staying at the Hilton Garden Inn, and you can't decide to go to certain sites on certain day. Let's just say it's a very controlled itinerary, and we'll leave it at that. And if you expect anything else, yeah, well, good luck. But it's always funny to me how people know so much about areas they've never been to. Now, oddly enough, I just thought I would include this because I was looking through a telescope a couple weeks ago, and I was reminded, no, I didn't look through a couple weeks ago, it was actually some time ago, looking at Jupiter. And oddly enough, looking in the sky and seeing how Jupiter and its moons were aligned. And oddly enough, I was just I'm just going to be honest with you all. It was strange to me that the moons were all in this very, very symmetrical line with Jupiter. So really odd things when you look through telescopes. Just a little observation. What's it have to do with all this? Well, who knows what we're looking at in the sky? Maybe that's what I'm getting at. Another little image of it. It was just strange to me. Why is it so symmetrical? I don't know. I'm so far away that the moons were just perfectly lined up? What are the odds of that? Probably the same as the odds of the the sun and the moon appearing the exact same size in the sky, right? The less you think about it, just don't think about it, just accept it, right? And then, of course, certain images when you look at the planets. And another oddity with them is just, I don't know, maybe it's just me through a telescope. I'm always struck by how two-dimensional everything looks. But, I can just attribute that to its telescope. It's the limitations of a telescope. Much like I'm presenting this to you on a screen, you're watching this on a video, it's two-dimensional. It's limited. I can't project the spherical planet Jupiter in front of you. Wish I could, but I can't do that. So, no limitations there. Now, you probably haven't seen this. This is a very interesting way of projecting the lands on a different kind of map. Now, you might remember that the Urbano Monte and even the earlier Mercator maps were considered planispheres. In other words, you had different sheets and you could lay them out. But oddly enough, this is another way of understanding how the lands all roll together. Very odd that they'd have this in this unique triangle pattern, wouldn't you say? I wonder what you get if you cut this out and you fold this all together. I mean, do you get a sphere if you do it? What do you think? Klingons near you. Okay. I'm not even going to say that. Nice try, reality checkmate. Yeah, KC933. Actually, 2,000 known. There's probably many more that are unknown, if you follow me. Hey, Calvin looking for obs. Yeah, we are looking down. We're always looking down, aren't we? So what's really the situation with that? I don't know. Ooh, decahedron. You get a pointy ball. Yeah, exactly. Ishko, the deception of telescopes telling you the truth about the universe reality. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I always remember the times that I looked through binoculars and I was always questioning what I was looking at then. But let's not talk about that scene from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, all right? It was a really long filming experience. Anyways. Now, a little image here of Little America, the official camp that was set up as part of Operation High Jump, Admiral Byrd's little mission down there. And so you can kind of get an idea. Here you've got the ships that are somehow operating right on the ice, it appears. I don't know, maybe they didn't break through it. And you've got a little bit of some equipment pitched here. And then you've got some tents down here. It gives you an idea of the layout of this. But oddly enough, it doesn't look like that down there currently. So did the situation change? Was it in a different location? Who knows for sure? I wasn't there on Operation High Jump. And yes, you can find a very, very polished and well-produced film that stars Admiral Byrd himself. And it was really filmed, apparently, conducting Operation High Jump. It's very interesting. You'll make of it what you will. And maybe they had a full film crew down there. And I got to say this, Admiral Byrd, I think he could have done a good acting career too. I mean, the guy could really emote well. Now, one final observation here. You might remember the rum lines or the loxodromes, the actual method of doing maritime navigation that was discovered by Portuguese mathematicians. How fitting from the exploration this last week. And oddly enough, these rum lines work on the sphere Earth, but then they also work on the flat Earth. Huh? The heck you say? How is that possible? Oh, the map of the Death Star. Yeah, good one there, Polly. Ooh, toroidal tessellation mapping from Rilo Ken. Yeah, wouldn't that make more sense? It just doesn't match up, though, on either one of those images that we have, do we? Fibonacci. Yes, the answer to investors and currency traders, right, KC933? Where's my Forex traders? Where's my Fibonacci? Need to get it going. Hey, Ptolemy, thanks for joining us. Well, don't worry. It's all recorded and you can go back and look at it. Sean P. Sacred geometry. Yes, as we would call it. The geometry that actually overcomes both shapes of the land. What are the odds? It works on both. Well, because that's how you explain why you have maps that are flat on charts for ships. It all makes perfect sense. Of course, who uses that stuff now? I mean, that's, Stone Age. We've got great digital maps now. We've got global positioning system. And of course, we have our good friend, artificial intelligence. It'll think for us. It'll do for us. Here's the old question here. Was this world map made 10 centuries ago? Well, I'm going to flat out say I don't know. But isn't this an interesting little indication? And oddly enough, it kind of matches the Terra Infinita map. And of course, the other map that showed other lands. So was it really made 10 centuries ago? Who the heck knows? Maybe it was made a lot longer ago. Maybe it was made 10 minutes ago. I don't know. But the ideas that it presents are very intriguing. The recurring theme of the circles, the concentric circles that work their way out. And when you go and you fiddle around or you meddle with the David Rumsey collection of maps, and that's where you can interface with the Urbano Monte map, and you can go back and look at charts of the old world and find that link, you'll see a lot of similarities. Is it a coincidence? Or is it really alluding to the fact that there is a lot more to this existence than we can even begin to imagine? Sissy May. If we find ourselves surrounded by a high wall, it's human nature to find out what's on the other side. Absolutely right. Ava's channel. I've seen the Southern Cross. Ooh. It is a beauty. The outer popcorn lands. Yeah, that's kind of what you see here, isn't it? Well, is it a realm? Is it something else? Maybe it's something even more than a physical existence. I don't know. Maybe realm is the most appropriate way to describe it. Greg, why does the moon appear larger at different times of the year? Well, is it really larger or does it appear larger? That's a good point. It's good observation. There's all kinds of anomalies that you can observe with the moon and the sun these days. And just talk to other people and see what they tell you. Hey, Queen Peachy Keen, good to see you. World maps 10 centuries old may show lands we've never discovered or we're not aware of. Oh yeah, just like the ones that we looked at that are 500 years old that show lands up in the North Polar region that we've been exploring for 500 years. But we don't know about these lands, right? The outer limits of my imagination burden me, the point I cannot see beyond. And maybe, just maybe, we'll keep on moving on. Yeah, if you can go out and take a look at the moon, I strongly suggest. It's definitely in an interesting appearance right now. Ah, yeah, World War II aerial maps. Great example there, Ptolemy. Very good example. And then, of course, we have this other map attributed to the 1800s, Hot Springs, South Dakota. And, of course, this is attributed to the flat Earth belief. But it is an interesting depiction. Now, I want to caution everybody, though, on something here. One of the ideologies that seems to be a recurring theme, maybe I should put it that way, that we encounter is the fact that we are imprisoned in some way, shape, or form. Whether you want to think we're on a planet flying through space and we're imprisoned on it, whether you want to think that we're in a giant crater like this and we're imprisoned within the crater, or whether you want to think that it's an infinite plane and somehow we're imprisoned within it. One thing I can promise you, if you believe that you are imprisoned, you will be imprisoned. If you believe that you are stuck in a recursion loop, then you're probably going to be stuck in a recursion loop. In other words, repeating and doing the same thing over and over again. But if you actually have the belief and the capability to really embrace something that's far beyond what your mind might have within it, then you might have the ability within you to go to other places, to really go beyond in your mind. And maybe that's what existence is all about. Now, I'm not meaning to get metaphysical here. I know it's a little bit of a different turn for me. But I do know that there does seem to be a theme to keep us very downtrodden, to keep our energy levels very low, to keep us in a feeling of confinement. And the last thing I ever want any of you to feel is confinement. Have an open mind. Consider these different possibilities. It's totally okay to be unsure, and it's totally okay. In fact, it's preferable to say, I don't know. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know. That's why I don't push a theory or what shape the realm is, because I really don't know. I haven't seen it from a perspective with my own eyes where I'm sure to say with any sort of confidence, yes, I know that it's a giant triangle, or yes, I know it's a tesseract. They're just theories, and that's all I'm going to present them as. And you're certainly welcome to share your views, share your beliefs at any point in time on this channel. That's the whole point behind it. As Brother Adam says, all I know is I don't know. And that's what a lot of it really is. One of my favorite lines from a movie that I'm going to be showing here is, it takes wisdom to be the fool. So, anyways. And then, of course, it should be noted that Google Earth now shows us an actual planet, a sphere, even though it didn't originally. So they've upgraded it. Although it's not actually a sphere, because remember, it's limited to a two-dimensional screen. So, I'm not trying to make any misrepresentations here. I'm just telling you the limitation is a two-dimensional screen. So just keep that in mind. And then, of course, the other looks beyond the ice wall. So are there other lands out there? Are there indications of other lands, or is it all just in our imagination? I guess we don't know. But we do know that the concept of there being other lands, whether you want to think of them as other continents that we access through portals, or traveling through secret passageways, or getting into a spaceship, or a starship as it were, and blasting off or warp driving to them, it's one of the strongest compulsions in the human mind. And oddly enough, you'll find plenty of people. Oh, look, Lemuria. You'll find plenty of people that want to really explore. That seems to be a natural human mentality. Curiosity. And with that, that is the end of the unknown lands. Thoughts on this exploration? I hope you enjoyed it. I know that it got a little bit more ethereal than I usually prefer. But sometimes you have to make those jumps if you're actually going to fathom explanations for what's really going on. Oh, it's okay, Heidi. It's never the end. It just means it's time to move to the next exploration. All right. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And the one thing I'll tell you is, don't ever be afraid to keep exploring. And even if all you're doing is you're exploring in your own mind, At least you're exploring where it really matters. Hey, Barbara, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Well, I'm glad you all enjoyed it. So, as always, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to read through all the comments, because one of the things I appreciate the most about live streams is all the ideas that you contribute. They matter and they're important. So before you go, please hit the like button, support the channel. And just a little friendly reminder that next week we're going to go back to exploring more symbols of Tartaria. So please join us for that. And it's really good to see everybody here. And this is a wonderful exploration. And I'm looking forward to going back and exploring more of those symbols. And yes, many of you have identified the little cue that I have in the new intro. I might have to change it up then, see if you can get the next one. So with that, this is Lucius Aurelian signing off, and you all have a good week. Thank you for joining me.
Where are we? Polar regions. The forbidden area.
What do you know of conspiracies? It's the charming thing about them, isn't it? When a machination is real, no one knows about it.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live stream for the Restitutor Orbis channel. I'm your host, Lucius Aurelian, and once again, you have requested another sequel. So, in as many weeks, I am doing another sequel, even though I'm usually loath to do sequels, and we are returning for an exploration of To the Unknown Lands. And in our main image here, you might see one of the facets of the Unknown Lands, one of the well-known images of a U.S. nuclear submarine, or any other nuclear submarine from any other nation, suddenly surfacing through the ice. And isn't it fitting that we're talking about the Arctic area, the home of Santa Claus, it just has the Arctic Ocean on it, right before December? I find that very fitting. Anyways, one of the things I wanted to follow up on and explore, based on a lot of the comments from To the Unknown Lands Part 1, is look a little bit more in detail in terms of what they tell us about these expeditions that went to the Arctic and the Antarctic. And then furthermore, I want to talk about some of the concepts with the maps that go along with them. Now, I held back a little bit on the maps, I'll be honest with you. There's some even more, how shall we say, interesting maps than what we looked at in Part 1. So as everybody's getting on, I just wanted to do a little reminder of this. So during the Cold War days, this was a popular image you would see of particularly the ballistic missile submarines surfacing in the Arctic Ocean. And the whole intention behind this was, well, then you could surface your nuclear ballistic missile submarine and launch intercontinental ballistic missiles from a submarine, part of the nuclear triad, the three methods of launching nuclear missiles. And in 6 minutes, you could have warheads to target. They even quoted it in the movie War Games. 6 minutes, says Dabney Coleman. That's barely enough time to get a decision from the president. I mean, I'd argue that's not enough time, but it was a movie, so make of it what you will. But what's it really telling us about what's up there? I think there was a little bit of concern because of the fact that they were pushing that concept of what we needed to be concerned about. And believe me, there was no shortage of fictional material, movies, films, books. Everyone was always talking about doomsday, especially during the Cold War. You couldn't spit without hitting doomsday. It was sort of like seeing a Batman logo in the summer of '89. You just couldn't look somewhere without seeing it. Anyways, there seemed to come a time frame, though, when this was really walked back quite a bit. In other words, they stopped showing these images. So it's rather intriguing, the fact that you used to see this all the time. I mean, you'd see this in newspapers, magazines, popular mechanics. Look what the mighty United States military can do. Look what the mighty Soviet military can do. Look what, name any NATO nation or Warsaw Pact nation. Yeah, I'll date myself then. Hey, Jamie, good to see you. I'm going to have a question for you later about Australia, so don't let me forget to ask you. But during that time, they always showed this image, this very dramatic image of the submarine that's surfacing through the ice and what they had to do. In fact, you can even find actor John Colicos talking about it. He was the guy who played Kor in the original Star Trek, reprised the role in Deep Space Nine, and also portrayed a wonderful villain as Baltar in the original Battlestar Galactica. Of course, we know what happened to the new Baltar. But anyway, this individual is Pythias, and he was originally a Greek explorer who had discovered the land or postulated the land of Thule. Now, if you're a channel member, you might recall there was a member exploration concerning Thule, but for everybody else, we're talking about the unknown lands to the north. Now, oddly enough, this particular individual in official historical circles and then the official historical account says that their explorations were lost, that there's no actual account of their explorations. But yet this individual is reputed to have sailed the lands to the north, although where he went, how far he got, we're talking 3rd century BC according to the official historical account, those accounts are lost. Isn't that amazing? Usually they never admit that accounts are lost, except when we're talking about someone such as Eratosthenes or anyone like that. Well, we lost the maps and the works of Eratosthenes, but we know all about this experiment and this model that he did that proved the actual circumference of the Earth, so on and so forth. But I just thought it was intriguing that this was one of the very early, and you could say, according to the official historical account, first explorers who tried to explore, namely the lands to the north. Now, of course, we're going to talk about both polar regions, North Polar and South Polar, again. But I found it interesting to mention this individual. And of course, they have a nice little old world statue, and who knows, that might even be a legitimate statue, not something that was, how shall we say, added later. What do we have here? Looks like we got a little seal or something, some other creature. Interesting attire that he's in as well. But oddly enough, he has that classical Roman Greek haircut, and then, of course, the eyes that seem rather blank. Oh, but we do have some well-decorated columns, so, at least his memorial or monument is fully realized. So just something interesting to think about, but... KC933, Lost destroyed the technology to go to the moon, so... Well, remember, KC, they said that that's because President Nixon said that the priority was not going to the moon anymore. It was too expensive, it was too difficult, so we went to the cheaper space shuttle program. Anyway, because the United States had already reached the moon, there was no reason to go and do anything else. They had won the space race. That's what the official history will say, but... Oh, yeah, Vaughn, you notice that. He does kind of bear a little bit of a resemblance to old Nero, doesn't he? So, anyways, moving on from our Greek explorer here, we also have Bernard Shriver, who is considered the father of Missile and Space Command. Now, you're probably asking, why are we talking about Missile and Space Command? We're going to get to it. You might be surprised to know that the air base that the United States maintained in Greenland used to be called Thule. It is now part of Space Force Command. And this individual, with all these really cool model rockets all around him that, somebody probably built for a nice display, he is considered to be the father of Missile Command during that time, and then the predecessor to modern Space Command. Just a little interesting note. But going on to the concept of the map of Eratosthenes, or Aristophanes, or however you want to say his name, it seems like there's many ways. One of the points of contention, aside from the fact that I guess he never decided to make a map that was a globe, even though he calculated the circumference. So don't ask me about that. Maybe he could wrap this thing around a globe. I don't know. Not going to go into that right now. But he posited that there were lands to the north. And here you have Thule depicted here. But one of the big points of contention was the existence of this land called Hyperborea. Now, of course, there is a lot of debate in historical circles about this. And indeed, the theory of Hyperborea is, of course, labeled and considered pseudo-history and also pseudoscience. So there's the official notification that you've gotten. I am repeating the mainstream account to you. So the existence of lands up north that the Greeks explored, to include our original Greek explorer that we just looked at, it's always been a very contentious topic. Now, apparently, history has confirmed that no, the peoples did not come from Hyperborea. They came from what is now Central Asia or India or some mix thereof. It's well documented, well studied, and lots of historical documents prove it. That's what the mainstream official historical account tells us. But oddly enough, when we look at some of the early Arctic explorations, okay, so we're looking at, depending on your perspective, the top of the world or the center of the land, depending on what model you go with. It really doesn't matter. It's always been very intriguing how a lot of the sea routes and the Arctic exploration always seem to go around the geographic North Pole, as though we didn't really want to go there. Now, of course, we know that it was reached by our good friend Roald Amundsen in his really cool airship with his Italian crew, and that our other good friend, Commander Bird at the time, prior to his South Pole exploits, flew over it, although the Norwegians disputed if Bird actually made it. Yeah, poor old Admiral Bird. But that's okay. He made up for it when he went down to the South Pole. But all kidding aside, it's interesting when you consider what they tell us about the routes and what they were really trying to explore. Because we have to ask the question, if it's nothing up there, if it's a frozen wasteland, it's a frozen ocean, officially that's what's up there. Why all this effort to get up there? What was the big deal? Well, I wanted to be the first person to go to the North Pole and plant the flag. It was the age of heroic exploration. But does that really match with the amount of resources that we understand they were devoting to this? Or at least, if nothing else, the amount of attention that they were devoting to this? That's always a little bit of the contradiction, you will. I'm not going to say conflicting account this time, a little bit of a contradiction, because at one point in time, people were very famous for trying to explore and reach this area. And then once they reached it, nobody cared, and don't really even think about the North Pole. Don't even really think about what's up there. There's nothing up there. It's just a frozen ocean. Maybe a submarine can surface up there and launch ballistic missiles, and we can all be worried about that 6-minute launch to landing time, but unless you're Dabney Coleman and it's war games all over again. 6 minutes. 6 minutes. That's barely enough time to get a decision from the president. You're right. Anyways, it's interesting to me, though, that they had these routes, and, you see the old Northwest Passage here. And again, channel members might recall the exploration where we had several accounts of ships, although now we're told that these accounts are mythical, that they're almost pseudo-historical themselves, about ships that had gotten lost, stuck in the ice, floated through the ice, came out the other side, and then were discovered by other ships, and the crews were found frozen. Now, these accounts are disputed. They are not official accounts anymore. But if you go back a few decades, they were official accounts. But it's another example of historical revision. We have more modern historians who said, no, that doesn't make sense. And then apparently they worked with more modern scientists, and then they revised those accounts. It's absurd that there was a ship that went through the Northwest Passage, stuck in pack ice, came out the far side in Baffin Bay, whatever you want to call it, by Greenland, and the crew was found frozen. That's just absurd. Of course, there's also an account of a ship that did the same thing down in by South America. So make of it what you will. But what are your thoughts about that, of these ships that are just going up there, taking tremendous risks to try to go through pack ice in an area that they know, at least we understand they knew, would freeze? Why would anybody try to do such a crazy thing? I mean, did they just not care about their lives, or were they really that desperate just to make it? Olaf Jansen. Yeah, that's a good one, Jamie. Very good example there. Albie, what have you got? I imagine historical circles, smoking pipes, mahogany armchairs, mustaches. Yeah, and you know what? I hate to say it, but it really hasn't changed that much. I mean, we can substitute the mustaches and we can substitute the smoking pipes. Now it's more fine wine, and now it might be more of a slick back hairstyle, but it really hasn't changed that much. Yeah, just people sitting around and kind of discussing these things, even though they have no firsthand practical experience. So, as I'm fond of saying, make of it what you will. Tommy Guy, was the climate warm that year? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the accounts that we have when these ships tried to navigate the Northwest Passage was no, they knew they were going into pack ice. And what happens when you sail into pack ice? Well, it's going to solidify and your ship's going to be stuck. We'll look at that here in a second. So, Dwayne, what would you do for a Klondike bar? Yeah, no doubt about it. What would I do for a Klondike bar? Heidi, those guys that went didn't believe the lies or made up the lies themselves. Once again, Heidi seeing through to the very truth of the matter. Call me crazy. Queen, Peachy Queen. Russia has 42 icebreakers. We have 1. Yeah, so they tell us, but who needs icebreakers? You got submarines that can just sail under it and just surface wherever they want to, right? But yeah, that's a good point. But who knows? Who knows what the actual numbers are? They also have that crazy plan of that aircraft carrier from World War II that was actually going to be built on ice. I'm serious, they really had that. Now, here's something else that's very peculiar. So what you have here is this temperate zone of the Arctic region. And what this line designates here is that everything south of this line, at least south as we understand the land, as you go to the southern latitudes, it'll get up above 50 degrees Fahrenheit or average 50 degrees in July. Everything north of that, it relatively stays frozen. That's what they officially tell us. Now, oddly enough, though, when you look at this, you see where the lands are that are actually north of this line and south of this line. And of course, you notice Greenland is all north of it. Oh, gee, not very green, is it? It cuts right through the middle of Iceland. So, yes, that's why Iceland is such a beautiful place. And if you want to know how beautiful Iceland is, just watch the film The Northman. They actually filmed it there. And Canada, parts of Canada, north of it as well. Most of Alaska is actually south of it, but then very peculiar, this portion of the Bering Sea. And you might recall this is the area where Captain Cook just went completely bonkers, although apparently he had a stomach ailment. That's what the official account says. And then after he went bonkers, they went to Hawaii, and then he got bonked on the head, and that was it for Captain Cook. But you see where this line actually runs, and you can see that there's something very peculiar about what lands are actually north of it. And it does seem to correspond with perhaps lands that people tend not to have notable access to. Now, oddly enough, Nova Zembla here, which is part of the Soviet Union at the time, the 1960s, now part of Russia. That's where they detonated the old Tsar Bomba. It was the largest nuclear detonation. What was it, 57 megatons? Shockwave went around the entire land, the planet, everywhere 3 times. It was measurable on the third pass, they say. Yet, make of it what you will. That's what they tell us. I didn't witness it. I don't know. But it's very peculiar to me, though, that where you see this actual line and everything north of it, it's where some mysterious and questionable things tend to occur. And yes, oddly enough, the entire land of Greenland has always been questionable for a variety of reasons. And we'll be looking at it a little bit more closely here in a moment, especially in terms of where Greenland actually runs with this land that we might recall seeing depicted. And we'll look at some more strange maps here in a little bit in the middle of what is just the Arctic Ocean. So are the lands there? Aren't there lands there? Were they just crazy and they were wrong? Again, Santa Claus can't be up there if it's just an Arctic Ocean, unless maybe Santa Claus is on a submarine. Yeah, I know, bad joke. I'm on a bit of a roll. Going back to the whole Franklin expedition, though, and if anybody watched the TV show The Terror, it's a great TV show. It mixes a little bit of the reality with a little bit of the myth, and who knows, maybe it's closer to reality than we know. But what they have here is, you might remember, the 2 sailing ships from the Franklin expedition were abandoned in April 1848, and the crews attempted to walk down to a whaling port, or one of the settlements that was in northern Canada at that time. But then ostensibly later, they actually found the wrecks of both ships, much, much later, which I always found rather peculiar, because what are the odds of that? I mean, those ships were stuck in the pack ice, and yet they found them later. That's what they officially tell us. Now, what's odd about this account was, the crew walked around. How would anybody know where they were abandoned? The official account says because they left messages in the little areas that they built up, the little storage areas that they built up of rocks, and then they left the messages in there. And then subsequent explorers or the rescue mission found the messages, and that's how they actually found the account of this. Because you might recall, not a single person ever lived. Well, not to spoil the TV series for you, but of course, Jared Harris's character lived. Anyways, make of it what you will, but it's this odd account that we have of ships being stuck in pack ice and then the crew having to walk a long distance. This is a very recurring theme that comes up with both Arctic and Antarctic exploration. Now, is that just a commonality because it is a very difficult area? Or is there something more going on? Is it an indicator that there might be much more extensive lands? And even as we're told, as we understand the model with the lines of latitude and longitude and measuring the mileage or the kilometers or however you measure the distance between them, it is a very vast area. But the question I'm asking here, do we think that this might be a much more vast area than we realize? And what would be the purpose behind that? Or what would be the reason for that? Why would it be a more vast area? Gen X of the 7th Power. Hopefully they didn't eat each other. Hollywood loves that. Yeah, that plot line comes up a lot. And not that I'm defending Hollywood here, I don't need to do that. They do a wonderful job of defending themselves, but it's kind of interesting because you do see it in fictional accounts a lot too. In a lot of books, that whole mentality comes up. Okay, we won't talk about the film Alive, all right? So, oh boy. Anyways, so moving on from this account of the Franklin expedition, you also have this nice little plaque, and you might recall we talked about the Amundsen, and they call it the Ellsworth Transpolar Flight when they flew over it, and the Norge, that lovely airship, which officially is a semi-rigid airship, although you might recall we saw it to be more of a rigid airship. Probably not any difference at the end of the day, but there it is. And the crew of the airship Norge, and here is the official plaque. So you don't need to question anything. There's an official plaque. Very peculiar, though, about how this expedition originally went down. And you might remember that when we looked at the picture of these individuals, there were some interesting discrepancies with them. But I'm not going to dive into that now. Just wanted to let you know that, yes, there is a plaque that commemorates it. There has to be, even though it appears to be out in the middle of flipping nowhere. Hey, we still got a plaque. So done, done, and done. And this just gives you an idea. I think this is from the Nansen expedition, the Norwegian explorer who was poking around trying to reach the North Pole in the 1890s. This is the situation that you tend to see, or what you run into. You get the ship stuck in pack ice. The ship's not going anywhere. And it doesn't matter whether it's a sailing ship or, if you have a more modern form of propulsion, although, the ships that we had available in the 1850s to the 1890s are rather questionable as well. We won't talk about the SS Great Eastern. Don't worry, we'll be getting back to it later. But if you know, and it's very clear that all these expeditions knew they were going to encounter these kind of conditions, it's rather odd that they just kept bumbling into it. I mean, were they that desperate to be the first to reach the North Pole? Yes, it's the age of heroic exploration, and I want to go and live in an ice world. I mean, it's interesting to me that somebody like Roald Amundsen, just loved to be in the polar areas. Maybe some people really love the cold. I don't mind the cold once I'm used to it, but it's just one of those interesting things to think about from the psychological aspect, because, even Richard Byrd himself, the great Admiral Byrd, he loved going to the poles all the time. He loved being in the polar regions. He was the guy who exclusively operated there. Is there something about those areas that draws these people there? Even though they're desolate areas of just nothing but wasteland that we see. And if you watch the TV show The Terror, they did a good job of conveying it's just nothing but empty space. There's really nothing up there. What are you really trying to win aside from notoriety? Yes, I planted the flag at the North Pole. Ooh, give me a big ticker tape parade when I get back home. And we'll talk about Nansen in a second. He's quite an interesting character, the guy from Norway. And oddly enough, he was involved in Norway's political break from Sweden. It's something that history doesn't really talk about a lot, is Norway actually broke away from Sweden, at least if you're outside of Norway, of course. Other nations tend not to talk about the history. I'm not really sure why. But, yeah. Yeah, frozen waste, Jamie. That's all it is. So what's really the purpose of going up there? Who in their right mind would want to go up there just for notoriety, for reputation? You'd certainly think there were other ways that you could get your name on a plaque, right? If that was your whole intention. Hey, Otis, the Titanic hit an iceberg and sank, yet wooden ships were able to traverse through ice fields for years. Yeah, that's kind of what they tell us. Yeah, the modern Titanic, and it was the unsinkable ship. Well, whenever you say your ship's unsinkable, you're kind of just asking for it to sink, I suppose. So what are you going to do about it? Oh, this is funny. Lucius, the icebreaker, Aurelian. Ah. Oh, my goodness. Jamie, how much high strangeness stories have we been flooded with recently? Quite a bit, actually. And it seems to be increasing, doesn't it? So, again, not really sure what to make of it, but you have to ask this question then. If these are the kind of conditions that these expeditions are running into, then why would anybody ever consider permanent settlement? Casey, did it really hit an iceberg? Oh, yeah. Well, everything about every account can be questioned on that one. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Wasn't there, can't tell you. Watch James Cameron's movie. And don't talk to Eric Braeden about how James Cameron treated him when he got him to portray the guy who was very famously sunk on the Titanic who opposed the formation of a certain institution. Okay, we won't say anything more about that, but yeah. And then, of course, they deleted all his scenes. Yeah, funny that. Old World Underworld certainly makes you think why it's so restricted. Yes, I mean, if it's just a very difficult and inhospitable area, then why do you need to restrict it? It's too cold. I don't want to be there. I mean, look at how many people don't want to be in Canada and the northern United States right now. We got another one of those Arctic weather blasts that just came out of nowhere. November was nice and temperate. Not anymore. Sound like Commodore Decker there. It was warm, but not anymore. Don't tell, don't ask. You know what? You're probably right on the money there. I was recalling a certain film, Virus, the one that came out in 2019, 2021. And it was really interesting to me. So, oh, before I go on, thanks, Random FX. I appreciate that. Well, yeah, that's odd. Well, thank you for doing that. Makes me wonder. But anyways, it was really odd, though, that they wanted to actually go on these expeditions. And going back to the movie Virus, they talked about the virus in the film would not operate in areas where it was too cold. But it was as though only Antarctica was cold enough. It's as though they completely forgot about the Arctic. If you watch that movie, make that observation. Like, hey, what about all the settlements? And there are actually permanent settlements in Greenland. You know, wouldn't they be free from this terrifying virus in that film? No, I guess the filmmakers forgot about it. I don't know. It's really, really bizarre. But yeah, it looks like it worked, Random FX. So thank you for that. So for new members, welcome. But anyways, moving on. Another odd thing with the exploration is you've got another map here showing Franklin's final expedition and the location of the ships. And recall that this is well north, 66 degrees, although oddly enough, this isn't as far north as the Top Gear crew went, apparently. So make of it what you will. Now here's something else that's interesting. They're talking about the map of current Arctic passages. So here we're looking at the current sea routes, and we're looking at both northern Russia and northern Canada on either side of the Arctic Ocean. And of course, we got Greenland right in the middle here. Greenland, which as it stands right now, still with Denmark, but not going to say anything about that because, yes, that's always a back and forth political issue. Not my concern, this exploration. Although it should be noted that there is a significant U.S. base near, or it used to be Thule Air Base. Why the heck do they need an air base up there? Well, don't worry. It's not an air base anymore. It's a Space Force base. We'll talk about it in a second. But this is really odd because here we have the future Central Arctic shipping route that goes right through the geographic North Pole. But it's only a future Central Arctic shipping route. I got a question. How exactly are ships going to be going through there? Are they going to have icebreakers that precede it? Or are we talking about a submarine route? I mean, granted, this is just a slide on a map. This doesn't really prove anything, you know, or if I'm a higher ranking U.S. military officer, I don't call it a slide, it's a chart. And if I'm a general, it's a storyboard. But either way, you know, whatever you call it, slide, chart, storyboard, it shows the same thing. Why in the heck would anybody concern themselves with a Central Arctic shipping route? Well, it's going to save a lot of time. Yeah, but isn't it very treacherous and expensive to go through there, especially if you have to precede the route with icebreakers? I mean, what's really with that anyway? I know I'm just asking questions here, and okay, obviously I did not serve in any sort of maritime service or the merchant marine even, but again, just asking questions, trying to understand it. You know, maybe there's a way that I'm not aware of. I'm not saying that I know everything, or would I want to know everything? I certainly wouldn't. You know, there's some people who want to convince you they do, but I'm not one of them. But, you know, here is the Northwest Passage here, and then the Northern Sea Route, as they call it. There's also the odd commonality you look at when you look at certain mythical worlds, such as, you know, whether it's Lord of the Rings, Tolkien's world, or if you look at even Game of Thrones, they oddly enough say the same thing about the Northern Reaches, where it's very difficult to get to. So, hey, Random, it looks like it came through there. So thank you very much for that, and welcome to the new members. Greatly appreciate that. So maybe it was just delayed a little bit. You know, sometimes things are a little slow. Maybe the weather's affecting it, huh? Oh, worth a lot of dollars up there. Yes, Heidi, very true. Because that's what you have up there, right? Yeah. It's just one of those things that doesn't make a lot of sense. And why all this effort? Or on another consideration, if we've had all these advanced navigational systems, if we've had this capability from the start of the 1900s or the 20th century, however you want to say it, then why don't we already have these routes fully established? Why don't we already have a Central Arctic shipping route, not a consideration for a Central Arctic shipping route? I don't know. Don't ask me. Yes, and going back to the account of the Nautilus. So the Nautilus being officially the first nuclear-powered submarine. And you can see it here. And oh, isn't that a lovely city in the background? Look at those beautiful old world buildings back there. Sorry, I got distracted. You know what happens to me at times. But anyway, back to the account of the Nautilus. 1950s, first nuclear-powered submarine, official history, official accounts. And this was the first one that actually went under the Arctic. And in fact, this is what old actor John Colicos was talking about during his interview when he said, and the Nautilus, and it's named after Captain Nemo's Nautilus. Yes, Captain Nemo from Jules Verne, the old world prophet that we explored earlier. This was the first submarine, boat, as they call them in the Navy, that went under the Arctic and went under the Arctic ice and then surfaced in the Arctic ice. There's even a story about some local that they encountered up there that said, you guys are going to be popping up all over all the time. You know, I don't know if that really happened. It's an anecdotal tale. But anyway, yes, the Nautilus started all that with that Arctic exploration. Although there's another peculiar thing when you actually try to verify locations and so forth with where these submarines are actually surfacing. And then what's the limitation on the amount of ice that the tower can really break through? And then what sort of efforts do they have to make on the tower to really break through the ice? I'm not saying they can't do it, but I'm wondering what's the real limitation on the capability. So just something else interesting to think about. And now we'll look at what used to be called Thule Air Base, and now is called, I'm trying to remember how to pronounce it, P2Feek. P2Feek. I'm trying to remember how they pronounce it. It's a local term, and I don't want to offend anybody. But they renamed it. This used to be Thule Air Base, and now it's a space base, I guess, at the top of the world. And this is where the mighty United States Space Force, which is a co-service with the Air Force, it's another uniform service, even though they both fall under the Department of the Air Force and the United States Department of Defense. Here's a little bit of an aerial of this base, and yeah, it gives you an idea of how desolate it is. So we're in northwest Greenland. We're way up in northwest Greenland. That's where this is located. You can look where Thule is, or where Thule was, I should say. But yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, I know. Kind of going with that whole mentality of having local names. Well, maybe they should change. Never mind. I'm not going to go any further with that. Let's just say there's been a lot of changing in names with U.S. military bases. So maybe we're just not supposed to think about it and just go along with it. Yeah, Jamie sums it up very nicely, doesn't he? Oh, goodness. But yes, these are some of the images they give us, the U.S. Space Force. And hey, I know, we actually saw an early image or early video of what the U.S. Space Force could look like. And it was actually in the James Bond film Moonraker. I think they sent the U.S. Space Force up there to bring down Drax's space station. Okay, I'll stop fooling around. But yeah, isn't this an interesting symbol here for the unit that's there? The old six-headed Hydra. And I don't really recall the six-headed Hydra being associated with anything in the U.S. military, but I guess you can pick whatever logo you want to. I remember there was a joke in the United States Army that all the best logos and all the best bases were taken by the Air Force, and that the Air Force had the right approach because the first thing they would always build when building an air base is a golf course. It's a joke, but yeah, that's what they used to say. So again, no sarcasm here. I'm being completely serious. Yeah, six-headed Hydra. But don't worry, there's all kinds of interesting patches when you look at certain special units of the United States military. Maybe it's a coincidence or they're just trying to be really cool. Hey, look at that. Is that the star from the Minnesota state flag? Or does it have more points on it? Is that a 4-pointed star? Is that an okay star? Or is it a 6-pointed star that's bad? Or is it an 8-pointed star that's bad? Or is any star bad? I don't know. Anyways. I know, I'm on a bit of a roll. Hey, thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate that. Oddly enough, it's not really giving me those notifications. Yeah, I wonder what's going on. Oh, well, we'll just work through it like we always do. So, oh, you noticed that. Yes, there is a very conspicuous G. Good call out there. Lost and found. Yeah, no doubt about it. So anyway, we do have permanent settlement. This base is there. It's always been there. There's other permanent settlements. There's cities in Greenland. But do we have any permanent settlement technically in Antarctica? And of course I say permanent settlement. I'm not going to say the C word because it has some connotations to it. So, what are you going to do? But oh my goodness. Anyway, I've been yapping a little bit. Hey, RB. Sorry I missed this. I wanted to highlight this. Your dad was stationed in Greenland for a few years. He was trying to escape his ex. That sounds like the good place to do it. Well, at least they didn't send him to the Mojave. There's much worse places you can be sent than Greenland. I mean, just between us, I'd rather go to Greenland than the Mojave, but anyways. So yes, that does show that there is a permanent settlement here. So anyways, let me switch off to our next series of images. And give me one moment here. And we'll take a look at the Antarctica expeditions here. And 1 second. And stop screen, share screen. And here we go. And we begin with the famous Antarctic explorer, Robert Falcon Scott. So now we're going down to the Antarctica, and we're going to consider expeditions and permanent settlement down there. My goodness, we're 34 minutes into this already? Where is the time going? Vaughn, not familiar with the six-headed hydra, to be honest. You know what, Vaughn? You and me both. I'd never really seen or heard of it before, but yeah, maybe it's something the United States military just made up. Somebody said, hey, a six-headed hydra, that'd be a great idea for a unit logo or a unit patch, and no one else will have anything like it. Anyways, so Robert Falcon Scott here. Now, Scott was the one who launched a series of expeditions, and he was in competition with Roald Amundsen to reach the South Pole. Yes, the same Roald Amundsen that took the Norge over the North Pole. So again, you have these guys who just like to be in the poles. Robert Falcon Scott. I mean, that's a name. I mean, that's just a name that says it all right there, You just see this image. This is the guy that can do it all. Robert Falcon Scott. British, of course. Anyways, and not that I'm saying anything bad about British. I mean, he actually has the same look that you see from the Norwegians, the Americans, and anybody else who's a polar explorer. So it really seems to have been an international memory. Anyway, his expedition met with tragedy, but we'll get to that in a second. He bears a striking resemblance, though, to Sky Marshal Inoki from Starship Troopers 3. Yeah, I just noticed that. Anyways, I'm sure that's a coincidence. And he was motivated and inspired by Fridtjof Nansen here, a Norwegian explorer. Now, what a name, Fridtjof Nansen. I mean, this is really a guy who is just destined to explore things. Now, we are in the Antarctica right now, focused on the Antarctica, but Nansen did try to reach the North Pole. But a lot of his sailing techniques and trying to survive once you get your ship stuck in pack ice, you can look up the accounts. He was the one behind it. The other interesting thing about Nansen, though, is he wasn't just an explorer. He was another one of those jacks of all trades. He was a scientist. He was a diplomat. Apparently, he was instrumental as the leading citizen in Norway to get Norway to split off from Sweden after they ended the Union. Yeah, that's that history they don't talk about too much unless you're actually from Norway or Sweden. Anybody outside of that? Oh, Norway broke off from Sweden in the early 1900s? I didn't know that. Yeah, apparently Nansen here was the guy who spearheaded that movement. He was also involved in the League of Nations quite extensively and had a real soft spot for a lot of people who were experiencing difficult times. Now, granted, official history condemns the League of Nations. They didn't stop World War II. They didn't really do a good enough job. Well, they just didn't have the availability of nuclear weapons as a deterrent yet. Once the UN had nuclear weapons, it didn't matter who had them. Then there wasn't going to be a high-intensity conflict like that. There was low-intensity conflict. Yes, I know. I'm using antiquated terms here very intentionally. But yeah, Nansen is an interesting guy. Arctic explorer, and really he was kind of the one who wrote the book. Even though he didn't actually reach the North Pole, he made a bold attempt at it, and a lot of things he learned were picked up by our good individual, old Robert Falcon. Nansen, we've seen him before. He bears a striking resemblance to Mark Hamill from Slipstream. I mean, what are the odds? And if you've never seen that movie, yeah, Mark Hamill plays the bad guy really well. Of course, it also begins the long streak of the many humiliations of Mark Hamill characters that continues to this day. But anyway, enough about that. So Roald Amundsen was actually the guy that reached the South Pole. And here we're looking at that particular expedition, which is very well documented with a timeline and a sketch map, apparently. Very interesting, though, about some of these ranges that had to be traversed here. Because they give you the impression that, well, Antarctic, it's all flat. But yeah, there's some mountain ranges that you either got to take the mountain passes. Of course, if you're familiar with mountains, you know that mountain passes, it can be some skill to find them if you're not familiar with the mountains. If you know where the passes are, it can save you a lot of time. If you don't know where they are and you're trying to poke your way through, it can take a lot of extra time. You can also see where Shackleton got to the farthest south point, but he didn't quite make it there. And Amundsen reached the South Pole in December. What a great time. Anyways, and you can see some of the other ranges here. And remember, this is just a sketch. It's not actually a map. Very, very interesting. But going back to Robert Falcon's expedition, they actually found some photos. And yes, I'm going to address that again because it's a very interesting point when we talk about what was found from that expedition. Have you been to the South Pole? I have not been to the South Pole. No. At least not to my knowledge, Jan. McMurdo was as close as I got. And there was something within me that didn't want to go any further south. Not really sure what it was, so. Did he eat his dogs? There were accounts, yeah, that it got to that point. They had a lot of issues, so. Not really sure what to make of it. But anyway, the Scott expedition, Robert Falcon, these are images from that. And, the Scott expedition ended tragically. What I find interesting, though, is that they have such wonderful pictures, though, from this expedition that ended tragically. Now, what you have here, the tragedy with the Scott expedition, is it started at Ross Island and they were going to the South Pole. Scott actually got to the South Pole, but he was just a little late. He was a few weeks after old Roald Amundsen had made it. So December 1911, Scott arrived. New Year's Day, apparently, or the 17th of January, 1912. So the official story says Scott didn't quite make it. He got beat by Amundsen to be the first person to the South Pole. To actually walk on the geographical South Pole. There's nothing there. So again, all this effort. Anyway, in the Scott expedition, when they were returning, they all died, to include Robert Falcon Scott himself. But his wife was a brilliant artist and made many monuments and statues to Scott, and they're all over the place. Yes, the official account actually says this. I'm not making this up. You can't make this stuff up. But anyway, Scott tragically died, and Amundsen was the guy who got the credit. So Amundsen is the man of the North Pole and the South Pole, apparently. And it's kind of funny because he also questioned, or at least the nation of Norway did, questioned Byrd's flight that went over the North Pole. So oddly enough, when you look at some of these older expeditions, and you might recall we looked at Captain Cook's route, and it's shown here, and you might remember that Captain Cook didn't actually find the Antarctica. He didn't find it. He did confirm, though, that there was not a gigantic megacontinent down there, Terra Australia Incognita, but he didn't actually find Antarctica. Very, very bizarre. And that was right before James Cook went bonkers, and then he got bonked on the head. But anyway, I'll stop with that one. But you see all these other subsequent expeditions about how they slowly mapped it out accordingly, and how this was a process, again, over hundreds of years, just like this sea exploration of Arctic. And remember, there are also accounts of ships that got lost, one even being found right here in the Drake Passage. Gee, it kind of sounds like the Northwest Passage, where they have accounts of sailing ships being stuck in the ice for years, being found, and the crews being frozen, perfectly preserved. Very, very odd. Of course, now, with modern science, they say no, these are all just tales of people on the sea too long, and they just make up things, and that's just how things go back then, apparently. Yeah, it's rather bizarre to me, too. Because not 20, 30 years ago, it was officially accepted historical fact that, yes, they found those ships, and yes, the crews were frozen. But now it's not. I guess it became pseudoscience at some point. Anyway. Yes, my favorite term. Oh boy, if I missed anything here. Yeah, just like the mermaids. Good one there, Opie. Anyways, please hit the like button and support the channel, and thank you everybody for being here. Back to the Scott expedition, though. So these are the photos that we tend to have of the Scott expedition or any of the other Arctic expeditions or Antarctic expeditions. And you can see that it doesn't really look like it's that good of a time, that people are struggling, that it's really cold, that you're dealing with frostbite and all other kinds of crazy things. Oddly enough, when you look at the frozen facial hair, that's always something that I found fascinating because everybody wants to go with the beard up there, but they seem to be pretty well equipped. I mean, early 1900s. But then we go into that very difficult area where we come on to the questionable things with what happened with misinformation. And so we'll transition to that in a moment. And there has been a lot of misinformation that's come out with a lot. Yeah, good one, Atticus. No eye protection. No. They didn't invent eye protection until the 21st century. Funny you mentioned that. Sorry. Anyways, the whole concept, though, of misinformation, and I want to devote a little bit of time for that because what does it really mean? And there's been a lot of misinformation that came up, especially with the Scott expedition. And this has come up before a couple times, but I don't want to beat around the bush. Now, let me show you something. So give me 1 second here. Stop screen, present, share screen. This is the book, The Lost Photographs of Captain Scott by David M. Wilson. This came out in the early 2010s. And this was really keen because it had unseen images from the legendary Antarctic expedition. It was legendary because Scott lost his life and, he gave the ultimate sacrifice. And you saw these images that came up for it. But you might recall, especially back when we did the Eutropia exploration, we had a slew of images that were purported to have been from the Scott expedition that appeared that showed very elaborate structures. Well, then someone came out and said that they were fake, that they had used AI. Although it's odd enough that since I did that exploration, I think I've had about 8 or 9 different people who've commented saying, yes, I was the one who actually made the photo. I was the one who tricked the alternative research community. And you're all so gullible because you'll believe any image that you'll see. The whole thing seemed to be rather, I don't know, a little orchestrated maybe. But no, of course not. You can't trust any image. And even if I had seen any images like this first, I would certainly question it because it seems a little bit too good to be true. But then again, is that to say that they're actually fake? I mean, who really knows? Unless you're actually there on the expedition. And that's why you've got people who are manipulating images and video all the time. And images and video can be manipulated. But this is the legacy of the Scott expedition now in current times, that there were a lot of quote unquote fake images, and now everybody's online saying, yes, I actually made the fake images. I even had somebody try to claim that I stole these images. Like, how the hell did I steal these images? I don't have this framed in my living room. It's not stolen. I mean, this is online and we're just evaluating an image. So don't try saying things like that. Steal what? Now, this tends to be what you actually see, the genuine photos, apparently, of the Scott expedition. Although, maybe somebody else will come up in a couple weeks and say, I made this image with AI. See, those horses, they weren't really there. They didn't have horses. They just used dogs. But I just made this image to make a point. I'm joking, of course. This is actually an official image from the book. But the point being is that we don't know. These are images from a book. What makes any image any more authentic? I mean, could this picture have been taken, I don't know, in northern Minnesota on the open plains somewhere? Well, there's not as many open plains in northern Minnesota. Let's go to the Dakotas. Let me be more accurate here. South Dakota, and somebody decided to build a little snow fort over here, pull their horses out. Hey, look, the horses have some nice blankets on them. Thank goodness they're trying to keep the horses warm, wherever the heck they actually are. But that's just it. Whenever you see an image and you have a caption or something affiliated with it, is the image real? Is the image of something else? You don't know unless you're actually there. That's the point I'm getting at. I'm not suggesting that there's any sort of conspiracy. I'm not suggesting that you should question everything. Just that you should keep an open mind. Maybe the images actually are real. Or maybe they're completely fake. Or maybe there's something in between. But an image is not the end-all be-all and the finality, as you're supposed to believe that it is. Oh yes, I have an image. There's an image of construction of the Iowa State Capitol that proved it happened. Yeah, there's an image of scaffolding, and there's always scaffolding around the Iowa State Capitol. So Make of it what you will. Oh boy. Okay, I've been remiss in looking at comments. I've just been going off quite a bit, haven't I? Good one, KC933. Yeah, the horses are posing. Make sure you get the horses posing. Get the good ones this time. So, oh, Albie, yeah, it could be Colorado or Wyoming. That's a good one. Yeah, exactly, Jamie. Cross-reference and first-hand accounts. So, oh yeah. Oh, and then here's another official photograph from the Scott expedition. Yeah, and apparently he brought one of the best photographs with him. So I don't know how you lug this record player with you at the time, and I don't know why the heck you got a dog sitting in front of it, but yeah, it's very, very peculiar. So, even the official images just have you scratching your head quite a bit, or at least what are stated to be the official images. So, I don't know, maybe the less said about that, the better. And then we do have the official image of the last rest, the grave of Scott, Wilson, and Bowers. And yeah, just a big little mound. You know what word I want to say. A little mound of ice blocks and a cross on it. And yes, this is very tragic. And Scott didn't beat Amundsen down to the South Pole. That's what the story says, and they all lost their lives trying to walk back out of there. They were hoping for rescue from sled dog teams, but it just didn't come to fruition. Hey, check this out. Am I seeing some pretty decent clouds in this image? Or, I don't know, am I just seeing things? Very, very intriguing. Yeah, you're probably onto something there, Polly. You're probably onto something there, so. Oh, there's a good one. You don't bury down, but bury up with snow ice. Yeah, that's true. Very, very true. Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I mean, so there's all kinds of questions about it in terms of what they're really trying to show. Yeah. Well, let's so your ship can get stuck in ice and there's all kinds of problems, but let's go on our little expedition. So anyways, okay, we're about 50 minutes in. With that, we're going to go on break. So we'll be back in 2 minutes. I'm going to put the Monty Python music on one more time, but I've been convinced by some interested parties to try some other music. So maybe we'll go on some other music. But anyway, before going on intermission, please hit the like button, and we'll be right back in 2 minutes. We're going to take a look at some really interesting maps that paint a little different picture than what our expectations might be. And we're also going to talk about that pseudoscientific concept of Hyperborea a little bit more. So we'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay, and we are back. Just give everybody a chance to get logged back on before we move on. And Jamie or Vaughn, either one of you, before I get started going on, I got a question for you. So, here in the northern latitudes, what they like to tell us is that we've got Arctic weather that's come in when it gets really cold, like it is right now. And I wanted to ask either one of you, because I've worked with several people from Australia. Do they ever say that in Australia, that we've got Antarctic cold fronts coming in? Does anybody say that in Australia? Antarctic cold front coming in, instead of the Arctic cold front, or Arctic air, Antarctic air. Does anybody say that in Australia? I've always been curious. Hey, Philip, Antarctic weather. Yeah. Polar vortex. Well, I guess that works for both. You can always say that, right? Nope, don't say that, huh? The roaring 40s, huh? Oh, yeah, MSM. Yeah, that sounds about right, doesn't it? Who else would say that? They always have their little sayings on there. Oh, not for a while. 20 years plus. Well, that's very interesting. Huh. All right, well, let's go on to our strange maps. And we've got some very interesting strange maps this time. And like I said, I was holding back last time, so let me get these images up here. And 1 second. Part 2. Strange maps. And of course, we'll just start right with a doozy, because why not? Wouldn't do it any other way. Present, share screen, and here you go. Now, this is another one of these old maps, and you might notice that the land in the center or the top, or however you want to look at it, I mean, here it's the center, it's a circle. They call it Hyperborea. Ah, yes, Hyperborea. That whole pseudoscientific concept. Oh, yeah, well, everybody loves strange maps because they're hard to explain, aren't they? A lot of the oldest strange maps have Jerusalem at the center. That is very intriguing, isn't it, Polly? Some of them have Cairo, but yeah, a lot of them do have Jerusalem. That is true. So, yeah, anyway, Hyperborea, that pseudoscientific concept. It appears on a couple maps. And even on this old map from 1572, they've got the Hyperborea Ocean that separates Iceland from Greenland. Huh, isn't that interesting? Again, Greenland running more west-east instead of south to north. They were really screwed up when they were making maps, weren't they? Oh, those silly people from the 1500s. I mean, granted, they could build exceptional cathedrals that are geometrically precise that we can't match today, but they couldn't navigate the sea to save their lives. Although, granted, they apparently also figured out how to navigate with rhumb lines and loxodromes in advanced mathematics. Huh, what do we have here? Tartar. I don't know. Something again. I mean, we've got other odd things on this particular map. But yeah, this is a really strange one just because of, by virtue, they're saying the Hyperborean Ocean, but then there's nothing up north here. So again, this whole concept, remember, it's all pseudoscience, and clearly these map makers, these cartographers, didn't know what the heck they were doing. I guess they just got lucky when they guessed the shape of Europe, or, maybe they actually got some accurate reports. But then you got this odd one here. Ancient map of Europe, and again, we're talking about the Greek times, and what do we have up here? Hyperboreans. Huh. Now, granted, that's the translation. Oh, look at that. Like an ocean around the entire circle. I mean, I guess regardless of which model, you can say there's an ocean out there that you're going off of. Whether you think it's a sphere, it's flat, it's a disc, or it's a tesseract, I don't know. But yeah, a lot of maps have this on there. So I guess it's just like all the maps that have Tartaria on it. Hyperboreans, it's pseudoscience. Tartaria, it's pseudoscience. I mean, or maybe they just screwed up when they, translated the maps. That's possible too. Oh, look at this. Amazons in Turkey. How about that? So, maybe they just had no idea what the heck they were doing. Right? Oh, goodness. Ah, yes, the outer spheres. The outer world, Jamie. An exploration coming up. Well, thanks, Deborah. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Anyways, let's look at some more. This is a very intriguing one. Now, found in a very old book, it's not an easily accessible map. But look at how it depicts this particular model of the land here. And yet, oddly enough, within the Arctic being the very center again. Look at that. America. I don't like the way you pronounce Vespucci. Oh, that's always so funny. People and their pronunciations. Because if you pronounce it right, you'll get a star on your forehead. Hey, look at this. California is an island again. Oh, again, those silly people. They just didn't know what they were doing. Oh, by the way, let's pay attention here. Look at this. Isn't this peculiar? So again, 4 ones, not an IV again. Would the Romans invent that later? Did they ever invent that at all? When you look at it here, yeah, again, 4 ones, like we always notice on the clock. Yeah, this is not exactly a book, or this image is something that's very easy to access anymore. This is part of that knowledge that seems to have been, how shall we say, revised. So I don't know. Maybe it's all considered pseudo-knowledge and pseudo-history now, too. So perhaps I'm inadvertently showing you pseudo-history, and if so, I don't mean to show you pseudo-history, okay? So it may be pseudo-history, it may not be. I mean, it's just an image in a book that anybody could have drawn, but it's another interesting model to look at. Ah, yes. And then here, again, this isn't the Mercator map, but this is considered to be similar or contemporaneous, drawn at the same time as the Mercator map. And once again, we have Greenland, west-east oriented. So, I guess that space-based would be up here. Isn't that interesting? Or maybe I should say over here to the right. But then you've got these islands that they say were just completely screwed up. There was never a Friesland. There was never any of these other islands. Those cartographers didn't know what they were doing. Oh, and look at this. Another reference to the pygmies again. The pygmy habitat. What are the odds? Nah, there's nothing up there. It's just a frozen ocean. Pseudo-cartography. There we go. It's pseudo-cartography. Oh, yeah. It's on there beyond any shadow of a doubt. Hold on, Jamie. We'll zoom in on it. Hey, Space Fraggle. Thank you for that. Oh, I'm glad. I appreciate that. And if I didn't mention it, I do like the image of Commander Krug. One of the best Klingons. Right up there with Kor. Hey, Brian. Oh, yeah. You remember the High Brazil exploration. Yeah. And that's another recurring theme there. So, did something happen? So here's Friesland right here, Jamie. This is where they tended to plot it as being. But there's all these accounts of some lands that disappeared and they're no longer there. So it's not just the mythical land that is now just a frozen ocean, so we're informed, in the Arctic, but it's also these other odd islands, such as Friesland. And then, of course, don't forget High Brazil. By the way, is that anywhere here on the map? No, it doesn't look like it. Here's Hibernia, which is what they used to call Ireland, apparently, and High Brazil was usually depicted right here. Another odd thing, though, is you've got Skellig Michael, that's right here, and it does seem to be on the map. Skellig Michael, that's very interesting. Oh, what's this? Is that High Brazil? Bruffill? I don't know. But yeah, it's another one of those questionable things. You see land depicted on maps and you're told these people were fools. And then the same people that tell you these people were fools, they'll tell you, but they were geniuses. They could build these buildings. They just worked harder in the 1500s. Okay, sure. So maybe they just sailed harder. They just weren't good at cartography. Yeah, I guess you could say Ireland's depicted a little small on this one, Polly. That's a good point. Danae Brady, if you look at a satellite map of the area, there's an underwater feature that looks like an island. Yeah, that might be something to it. That is interesting, although I often wonder about the satellite maps. Not that I'm questioning the existence of satellites or anything like that. I'm just saying I wonder about what we see in them. So, yeah, there you go. Craptographers, Polly. Here's a good question from Vaughn. Why does Greenland move around so much? That is a very interesting question. I mean, is it just because the map makers didn't exactly know what they were doing? I mean, we're not talking about charting off far off places. I mean, we're informed that Greenland was very well known. Iceland was very well known. I mean, heck, if you watch The Northman, we know the Vikings sailed to it. They knew all about it, right? But I don't know. I mean, is it because there was something with the nature of the land that changed with Greenland? Did they really not know or understand it? I mean, you might recall in the maps that we looked at in part 1, they didn't even seem to know where the coastline of Greenland is. I mean, here it's very distinct. It has a coastline. I mean, so it is an entire island, if you will. It's not part of some great supercontinent that's up on the north anymore. I mean, it is kind of attached to a supercontinent in this map, but I mean, I don't know. Very, very interesting. And then, of course, you can even find some more exotic maps such as this. And then, of course, here you'll see, Greenland. So we don't really have the coastline charted here. So is it all part of the Arctic Ocean? Is Greenland the Arctic Ocean? Well, on this map it is, but, what's really going on? Did they just not know, or could they not draw maps? Going back to that phenomenon we observed in part 1. But another peculiar feature about this is you see that all these towns and cities are very detailed on this map. And keep in mind, these maps always have lines of latitude and longitude on them. So even like a modern grid map that you might have, or a modern military grid map, then ostensibly you should be able to get coordinates. And you'd like to think that the coordinates that these towns and cities are at would actually match what's on the map. Or if that didn't happen, then something very bad would happen to the cartographer. But it's just another one of those really strange things because, well, yes, people were experts at A, B, and C in the 1500s, but navigation, I mean, yeah, they were mathematical geniuses, but then when it came to making their maps, they were just off. It's another one of those massive conflicting accounts. And if you really want to go crazy about it, research the Mappa Mundi, or basically any map that's attributed to the quote-unquote medieval times. That's what they call them, Mappa Mundi. And you'll find all kinds of anomalies. I don't know, maybe we'll have to do a live stream just looking at Mappa Mundi and medieval art. That might be interesting in and of itself. Oh, here we go. And so here we have this really, really old Homeric cosmogony. Hey, look at this. Hyperboreans, Cimmerians. Am I getting some Robert E. Howard vibes here? But then we got Thrace and Greece and everything else. Interesting way, though, how they showed Libya, which apparently is now the continent of Africa. And then you've got Asia Minor, Turkey now, the Middle East, Phoenicia. I'm just having fun with it a little bit. Cyprus, Crete, Rhodes, the Key Islands. Ooh, Sparta. Is Malta on here? I don't think I've seen Malta. Malta's always a very interesting place. By the way, there's a very unique martial arts film, Black Eagle, that had Jean-Claude Van Damme in it, and it was all filmed in Malta. So while I may not be able to recommend the film on its own, unless you're a big fan of those really hokey 80s action martial arts films, they do have some wonderful scenes of the old world. So Black Eagle, that's the name of the film if you want to see it. But yeah, all these maps. Ooh, what's this up here? Region of the Night. Well, isn't that intriguing? This is from the Greeks again. The route of the sun during the night. Very, very interesting, huh? Where the sun rises, where the sun sets. I thought Malta was the oldest point of civilization. Yeah, there are some that say that. Venetian. Oh, that's good wordplay there, Jamie. Might be a little bit more of a coincidence. So, Julia, it appears there have been many cataclysms that have reordered the lands and coasts, making seas unnavigable, leaving people unable to travel for long periods of time. You are probably more right than you know on that one, Julia. Great comment. That seems to be what we're actually looking at. Yeah, and Malta is amazing. And so, if you really want to see Malta, but you can't actually go there or can't find enough modern imagery in 4K, I strongly suggest watch the movie Black Eagle with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Okay, the real star of the movie is Shu Kasugi. But, whenever you needed a guy who could actually do martial arts and had more charisma than your lead, you get Shu Kasugi. Anyway. Okay, enough of that. Let's see if I got any more. Oh, yeah, this one. Orbis Terram. So this particular map, again, showing lands up in both polar regions. So we got lands up in the North Polar region, and then we've got very extensive lands that Captain Cook proved were not there, but he missed an entire continent, official. But maybe that's when he was having issues with other stomach bugs. Who knows what was going on. But, who knows what changed here? And what's interesting about this particular map is this does show the Northwest Passage. So it was going to save you time and you weren't actually going into an ice field, maybe you'd be inclined to try it. I mean, it's not like they say the Drake Passage down here by South America is any better. And those were your only two options. They didn't have the Panama Canal yet then, in the 1500s, although they were scouting for it. And you might recall that Scotland tried doing some sort of, this is official history here, okay, so I'm not dogging on Scotland, but they say that Scotland tried to do an overland route and make it marketable. And because it was such an economic disaster, this is what forced Scotland to agree to the Treaty of Union and ultimately rejoin Great Britain or the United Kingdom, according to official history. You know, that's after that whole William Wallace thing. Hey, look at this. No Great Lakes, but Shilaga is there. So, you know, you always get all these discrepancies on these maps. And yet, what do we have for Greenland? Well, here we have Greenland looking a little bit more correct, but it seems a little small, doesn't it? Or at least, is it correct? I don't know. Did it change? I mean, here you've got Great Britain and Ireland right here. But then there seem to be all kinds of islands that are all across the Atlantic. Larger islands. Very peculiar, isn't it? Oh, yeah, the Strait of Magellan. Yeah. I do wonder. Oh, you noticed that, Polly. Yeah. Good observations there. Oh, yeah, the gap at Tierra del Fuego. It does look like giant serpent's head on terrain maps. Although I wonder, is that an actual view, or is that something that we're supposed to see and perceive? I'm not really sure. I still think Australia doesn't exist. I haven't been there. It could be made up. Well, yeah, it could be made up, but, you know, there's just, we would expect to have, well, I'll tell you what, just watch Territory, and that'll prove to you Australia exists. Sorry, I had to go there. Anyways, do I have any more? Oh, yeah. This other old Greek map. Hey, look, we got people riding snakes. And Hyperborovia. Hyperborovia. I wonder. Hey, look, Helios right there. Nice. But yeah, these maps always give you all these indications. Now, here's the other question we have to ask, though. How authentic and how accurate are these maps to what really came from history? Because I can assure you, there might be something that happens when somebody copied the map, when the map was transposed from the original parchment. Did the original parchment from the 1500s actually survive and reach us today? Or is it a copy of a copy of a copy? And if it's a copy of a copy of a copy, remember that officially they didn't really have the ability to copy things effectively. It was one person who hand jammed it and copied it. So could more mistakes have been made? Or are they authentic because there was a technology that existed that did enable them to do very authentic copies? I know. I'm a little bit all over the place with this one, but that's what we just don't know. What was the actual capacity even to produce documents that would survive? Was it possible to make books that would last for hundreds or thousands of years in the distant past? Is that really what a scroll actually is? Is that how we actually have records? Who knows? Who knows for sure? And if such things were built or were manufactured, and they did endure to this day, would we be allowed to have access to them? I think you know the answer to that. But yeah, precisely. But, you know, it's that question that nobody really asks. It's not an easy question to ask. Hey, I got the launch point to Antarctica being New Zealand always was interesting. Almost like New Zealand is an important entrance point to Antarctica. Yes, and in fact, on official notes, every air corridor goes through New Zealand if you're going to access it from that area. But you know, knowing all this, I strongly recommend, if you get the chance, watch the film Virus. You can watch it for free on YouTube, the remastered version, or if you feel like watching a more Americanized version, it's a Japanese film, but it's in English. But yeah, or you can watch there's the remastered version that's on YouTube, and there's the restored version on Amazon. Two completely different films, but the premise is quite intriguing. You know, when they have to survive the quote-unquote virus, because only in Antarctica is it cold enough. I guess, like I said, it wasn't cold enough in Greenland, so. Anyways, let's see. Any more maps that we have? Oh, I saved the best for last. Yes. Location undisclosed. You can probably guess where this may be. I'm not going to say it. But yes, there's a very peculiar world map here in this undisclosed location. And oddly enough, it's somewhat accurate, it's somewhat not. But some of the details we see, well, look at that. Antarctica coming a lot closer to South America. Drake Passage? Or is it a canal, basically? I mean, it looks like a canal on this map. What exactly is this showing? And why does it seem like there's more of a temperate environment? I don't know, maybe that's just my imagination. Maybe it's not. But it almost looks like there's a more temperate environment in what we think of as Antarctica. Another odd thing is that it appears to be what's called a Robinson projection. I don't know, maybe that's just my imagination for the map. You got the center point right here. So a 6-pointed star. Good star, bad star, don't ask me. But then, oddly enough, when you look at America, I mean, early Great Lakes here. Very, very odd. But then look at this. All open ocean. But then they do actually show lands here. And Greenland is very small. But look at this. Greenland is now oriented southeast to northwest. So yet another orientation for Greenland. Isn't that odd? I think I see a little rock up there. It might just be my eyes. And lands all around it. And look at that. Looks like Friesland is on this particular map. Very strange, huh? Yes, I'm sure you'd love for me to tell you exactly where this is. But we know what'll happen if I tell you exactly where this is. Like I said, you can probably guess. But isn't that interesting with how they show some of these anomalies? I think they even show the canal on here. Maybe that's just my imagination. Oh, it's not the complete canal. It was only the halfway done one in Nicaragua. You know, the one they talked about doing. Probably the strangest map of all. Oh, and we may as well look at some of these figures because we've got some interesting figures here on this particular map. Again, not going to make any commentary. I'll let you come to your own conclusions with this. You know, what people are really being displayed here? Are these Greeks? Are these Romans? Are these Nubians? I mean, what the heck do we have going on here? Very, very interesting. Or are these a completely different group of people that we have no idea? I don't know. Thoughts on this unique map? Yeah, it would be associated with the Mediterranean mentality, wouldn't it? So, yeah, that's right, Anne. Showing that knee, you better watch out. Almost as though in that society, or whatever society these people came from, you were supposed to show your knee. I don't know. Not sure what to make of it. Warrior, where is it? I'll give you a hint. It's in the Mediterranean. Let's just say it's a place I've talked about quite a bit. So, and with that, that's the last one. So, that's it for the strange maps. And we'll end off on a very interesting, or actually, I've got one little thing. I wanted to take a look at some northern lights, southern lights, or aurora borealis. So let me get those images up. And I'm not finding the most interesting ones. I just want to get some of your thoughts on the aurora borealis. And we'll start with an old painting, actually, because this painting was always very intriguing to me. So this is a painting, 1840s, 1850s, that shows aurora borealis. Yet there's something very peculiar about this particular painting, because it's almost like we've got a ship stuck in pack ice here again. And yet this is purported to be in the south. Now, they call these the northern lights. Is that an accurate term, or should they also be called the southern lights? I mean, what are your thoughts? Aurora borealis. What's the official explanation behind what aurora borealis actually is? Oh, there you go. I knew somebody would go right off on it. Yeah, Southern Comfort. You're right. You're right, Sloan. Sloan Peterson. Sorry. Ferris Bueller vibes there. I know it's Sloane Pierce, but just had me thinking of Sloane Peterson. Ooh, almost looks like continents up there. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Good call out there, Polly. Yeah, the world lights. Ooh, and I think they're the veil that keeps the physical realm from seeing the spiritual realm at the true North Pole. Well, that's a better explanation that I've seen than, solar flares or solar activity. It makes a lot more sense. Hey, New West Reset, thanks for that. Appreciate it. And thanks for joining us. Ooh, Aurora Australis. Yeah, Aurora Australis incognito, right? Anyway, let's take a look at a couple more. Now, here is one of your more modern 4K images. And, there's something interesting to me whenever we look at 4K images. It's like something with the detail is lost with them. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I can see everything with the total detail and clarity. But maybe that's just me. There's always something that seems off with modern high-def images. I'm not saying I don't like high-def images. It's just there's certain things that seem off with them. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just because I'm a fool who grew up watching a really cruddy TV, a really small color TV, and I couldn't see that it wasn't William Shatner who was jump kicking Ricardo Montalban. It was actually two stuntmen. You can see it very clear as day now, but I couldn't see it back then. I thought it was William Shatner who was jumping up and throwing his foot in Ricardo Montalban's chest and sending him back into the fencing of the engineering section in classic Star Trek. But I don't know, you look at these images and they give you an impression, though, that there's something more behind this Aurora Borealis. Southern Comfort, Northern Lights, whatever you want to call it. Some people even suggest that there might be some sort of intelligence behind this. Now, just sharing theories. I'm not telling you what to think about it. If it's just sun activity, fine, it's sun activity. If you think there's something a lot more behind it, hey, all the more power to you. But it's just one of those things that always stood out to me so much. Oh, yeah, he did some of his own stunts, New West Reset. In fact, the big hand-to-hand fight in Mirror Mirror, that was pretty much most of the actors. Right down to Nichelle Nichols getting thrown into the wall. I mean, they did a great job on that one. So, yeah, he did a lot more of his stunts as the show went on. But in the first season, you can see it. Of course, we won't talk about the very obvious stuntman, Brent Spiner, lifting Will Wheaton out of the water in the pilot episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Goodness gosh, is that one show. Ooh, light reflection off the Emerald City. I like that. Yeah, maybe so. Oh, Donna Marie. It's the bottom of the simulation screen. Yeah, a little 13th floor vibe going there. I can see that as well. 13th Floor, Dark City, all those reality films that came out. This is an interesting look at it. Now, this is the old magenta look. And, has this image been modified? I don't know. I just found it interesting, though, that this is one of the images that would come up in a search. Now, like I said, I have purposefully not found the best or most exotic images of Northern Lights, Aurora Borealis, or Southern Comfort for a reason. I strongly suggest that you go out, if you can, and see them on your own, with your naked eye. Don't see it on a photograph. Don't see it on a computer image. Don't watch a computer video of it. Really go out and see it and watch how it behaves. It's not something I can describe, and it's not an experience I can convey over the limitations of a live stream or a video. Actually, I think the painting at the very beginning that we looked at, that actually conveys it the best. But that's just my opinion. You also see different forms of it, and oddly enough, when you can actually see it when you have another celestial object, whether it's the moon, Polaris, or whatever bright star is out there, you get other very intriguing effects. Almost as though you could say it looks like some kind of, I don't know, detached landmass, maybe? I mean, that's just my imagination, looking for a way to describe it. Yeah, there you go, Jamie, screensaver, right? Random FX, whatever it is being seen at much lower latitudes recently, or higher in the southern hemisphere. Absolutely. As though the range of it seems to be increasing, going to places it was not seen before. When I was a kid, I think the first time I actually saw it, now granted this was when I was an older kid, it was in Alaska. That was the first time I ever saw Northern Lights. It wasn't even in Minnesota, it was in Alaska. So, but who knows? Ooh, Inferno, separate light sources. Yeah, I wonder about that too. That's an interesting premise. Hmm. Hey, Rebecca Brown. Yeah, I mean, now you can see it all over Minnesota. I just, in my early life, I just don't recall seeing it then. It's not to say it didn't happen. I'm just saying I do not recall seeing it. That's all. So, oh, New World over, or hasn't been seen in 150 years, perhaps. Yeah, another way to look at it. But then, some of the images will give you a little bit more of a dramatic presentation of it. Now, this is probably one of the images that does capture a little bit better, because when you get it at its most dramatic, you'll see there are many multiple colors. And again, maybe it's just my imagination, but when I've actually seen it in person, it really gives you the impression of almost being something alive. That's the best way I can describe it. Something truly ethereal. Now, who knows? Maybe it was the original Necrontor spirits up there that are waiting to be swallowed up by the Seaton. I don't know. I'm being facetious. That's a Warhammer 40K reference, by the way, if anybody's tracking. But yeah, it's quite an amazing image. It's very dramatic, and yet, for whatever reason, it's always struck me quite emotionally as one of the most beautiful images, one of the most beautiful experiences. Why don't I put it that way? Because if you actually watch it, it's not an image, it's an experience. You really see this living thing, just like seeing a meteor shower. Yeah, I can send you a picture or an image of a meteor streaking through the sky, or I can even show you a video of it. It's not the same thing as seeing it with your own eyes. It doesn't even come close. What's Polly got here? I actually saw a gigantic green cloud in the sky in the early 2000s. The news said it was anti-Newton missile testing in space. Can't find anything talking about it anywhere today. Oh, yeah, it sounds very similar to that anomaly way up in northern latitudes a little while ago. My bailiwick zone. I look at the sky all the time and have never seen it. Well, the way things are going, my bailiwick zone, it might be coming down near you soon. Just like the first Star Trek movie from 1978, the cloud was alive. Oh, yeah. Why is everything we don't understand always called a thing? When Bones looked like Yukon Cornelius with his crazy beard. Yeah. Ooh. Plasma, waves of energy. Yeah. They do appear like that, don't they, Donna Marie? V'ger. All right, let's see. Do I have any other images of it? Yeah, there's something like this, so I think that's enough, but I did save one image for last, and intentionally showing it last. So I really think that the painting here really conveys the uniqueness behind the phenomenon, whatever you want to call it. But, they do provide us this kind of imagery from our friends at the International Space Station. Why does this not look as dramatic as looking at it from the other side? I don't know. Maybe it's just because you're supposed to see it from, the surface, and maybe that's why. But yeah, they have plenty of quote-unquote dramatic images. I love all those blue stars that you can see too. Not affected by the atmosphere. Okay. I'm not going to say any more about that. Okay, so last portion of this exploration, the inner and the outer world. So give me 1 second here. I'll get these images up. And this is our last section. Now, you may have heard of the concept of inner world, but you might be surprised to know where it first officially started. Now, this is again according to the official historical account. So, you may or may not have read the book Dante's Inferno. But in Dante's Inferno, it was actually considered, by the official historical account, the first concept of there being an inner world. In other words, the many levels of hell. The 9 levels, the 7 levels, the 9 gates, whatever you want to call it, as you go down, reaching the center of hell, where Satan himself is chewing on the 3 traitors in eternal agony, and then all the different levels. But yeah, Dante's Inferno. Definitely a work that seems to have been composed with the desire to inspire fear and terror in people. And effectively did so, and does so to this day. But there are other depictions that you might be surprised to know that the Mayans apparently had accounts of there being an inner world or a hollow world. Now, again, let me give you the preface note. There is no definitive evidence of there being any hollow world. The deepest we've ever gone is the Kola borehole, and that's only been a couple miles. We've never gotten through the crust of the Earth, according to the official scientific method. So, bottom line up front, nobody really knows is what I'm saying. But I'm not saying there's any scientific evidence that proves there is a hollow world, or the world is hollow and I have touched the sky, for another Star Trek reference. I'm merely stating that there are mythical accounts and there are many fictional accounts from different cultures that state that there is the possibility of a hollow world. That's what I'm saying, to be very clear. Got to be careful on that. But there's also no shortage of maps, though, from people with wild and crazy imaginations that show a completely different land. A land that's actually on the inside of the world, the hollow earth. Of course, that would go with more of a spherical earth, although you have to think outside of the shapes as well, because if it is possible, then is it possible that there could be an entirely different form of existence? And this is one of the reasons why one of the theories that I try to give a little bit more attention to is the Tesseract theory, or the four-dimensional existence, the hypercube as it's called. Because if you have a hypercube, well, then suddenly you could have evidence of everything. You can have evidence of something that's a disk, something that's flat, something that's round, something that's spherical, and something that's hollow. I know, it's kind of crazy, but it does seem to fit all of them. Ooh, Desert of Doom. I'll bet that's a nicer place than the Mojave. Sorry. Well, not on this one, Vaughn, but I think you can find some with apes. Although I don't know if you'll find Dr. Zaius in it or not. I loved it when everybody was saying Dr. Zaius was right. Dr. Zaius was right. Yeah, Dr. Zaius got instantly incinerated. I don't know if I'd call that being right. And then, of course, you have to ignore the fact that in the films, they're clearly showing that apes are going the same way humans did. But yeah, I'm not going to go down that. Yeah, you noticed that. Well, you know. Yeah, a little Tyrannosaurus there. But yeah, just a very interesting concept there. Oh, look at this. Tower of Fear. This doesn't look like a happy place. Swamp lands with the Loch Ness Monster. Got a Stegosaurus down there. Ooh. Shambhala the Golden. Triceratops. Umber. Oh. And then ruins. Ruins of Shabandaba. Khalistan. The Merchant City. Forest of Ebener. Mercenary Riders. Hey, isn't that cool? They got the Mercenary Riders there. I wonder if they're nice guys. Maybe they make good coffee. Ooh, look at this. Centaurs. Well, I mean, this looks like an exciting place. Tree-delling dwarfs. Cave of the Cyclops. I wonder if I could meet Rel there. You know, I always wanted to meet Rel. Now, there are other accounts from other books, and I've got to be careful on what I show here, that also give the account of the hollow earth, although, again, it tends to be associated with pseudoscience. Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to take this elevator. Something tells me it might have some flaws in it. I'm not sure why I think that. But so there are accounts that show that there was a land, but is it really in a hollow earth, or if it does exist, is it somewhere else entirely? I like how they've got the Lake Baikal reference here, because Lake Baikal is so unbelievably deep. But then there's also other older accounts and older forms of artwork that give the account of the hollow earth. Now, again, remember, we're all just looking at pseudoscience here, so. Ooh, that's a good one there, Saxon. Yeah, Middle Earth. Yeah, I don't know. Dragons, dinosaurs, all kinds of creatures. The creatures of Middle Earth. You know, is it a primitive world? Is it inside, or is it an outer world? Reign of Fire. You know, that was actually a pretty decent movie. Oh, yeah, it had Christian Bale in it. Silly me. And then also some other depictions that indicate what may be on the inside. Although, who knows? You know, is it really depicting a planet? Is it depicting a circle? Hard to say. You know, I mean, what's any of the maps that I'm looking at really showing? Because all maps are trapped in two-dimension, although they appear to be two-dimension. Ah, yes. And then just so I show this, our official scientific understanding of what the planet is really composed of. Although remember, we've never actually gotten through the crust with anything. So do we really know? Is it a theory? How do we really know? Obviously, the movie The Core didn't really happen. So, how do we know for sure? you know. No one's going around with a group of scientists with unobtainium and going all the way to reignite the core. Hmm. Yeah, there were some interesting movies in the 2000s. But then, of course, the more traditional theory of how at the poles that would actually be the entry point. Now, is it in reality a geographical entry point? Are the poles exactly what they are? I don't know. Like I said, I haven't been there. But it is an interesting way to look at things. Now, to close up this particular exploration, I do not have anything of the concept of the outer world yet. I am going to save that for a subsequent exploration because exploring the outer world, not to be confused with outer space, there is actually terminology called the outer world. But what exactly does it mean and where does it come from? It is analogous to the inner world, but yet it is used a lot. In fact, you see Frank Herbert use it a lot in a lot of his writings, the outer world. So you just can't get enough of that Greenland, can you, Vaughn? You just can't get enough of it, can you? Why wouldn't the oceans cook? That's a good question. Oh, outer world or outworld? That's another good way to say it. Yeah, I guess you could say it looks like a cell, Sky Sage. It does look like a cell, doesn't it? Ah, Portal World. Yes. What's Heather say here? The Earth to me is like a DC generator, so I believe there is something like a sun within. Well, what's interesting, Heather, is that's actually the different theories, if you will, or scientific realities, depending on your perspective. Yeah. Whether you want to think of it as a core. I mean, they say there's a core down there and it generates magnetic forces, and that's what the poles are really about. But is that actually what it is? I'm not sure. Yeah, well, interesting what is on here, Siberia, China, India, Australia, South America, Mexico, New York, North America, ice barrier. So yeah, all very intriguing in more ways than one. So anyway, that concludes our second part of the exploration to the unknown lands. Oh, I got to field this one from Polly, though, before I depart. I still don't understand how they identified all the cores of Earth. I mean, with what equipment, technically, if it's so hot? Well, like I said, they've never actually sent down, what'd they call it? The Virgil in that movie? I was not the biggest fan of the core. I mean, it had some interesting ideas in it, but no one's ever done that. I mean, the Kola borehole is as deep as we've ever gone officially, and there's all kinds of rumors associated with what happened with that thing, but, I don't know. So, I mean, it has to be a theory. They haven't seen it, just like we can't get that close to the sun. And there's conflicting accounts on how physically close you can get to the sun, interestingly enough. Although a certain building in a certain city could be close enough to a device that when it went off, it was as hot as the sun. So I don't know. Don't ask me. Yeah, that was the borehole, Donna Marie. That was the one. So, anyway. Oh, hang on. Yeah, Heather, you're right. Massive crystals within the Earth. I need to get back to those explorations. That was one of the very early explorations I did. And you've got a completely different set of environmental conditions within those crystal caves. So, anyway. All right, well, before we depart, everybody, please hit that like button. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been another very incredible live stream exploration. I haven't decided if there's going to be a live stream next week or not. I'll be sure to let you know. But either way, there'll either be a live stream or there'll be an exploration release to compensate for it, one way or the other. It just depends on my schedule. Yeah, once in a while I get schedule conflicts too. So Anyway, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And wherever you are, I hope you have a great week. And we will see you soon. This is Lucius Aurelian signing off.